We are officially over the hill. This is version 40 of Breaking Change. Hello, welcome. My name is Justin Searles. I am the current host of the program. Version 40. It's a big day. That means if it's anything like my life, it's gonna start falling apart right about now. Yeah, turning 40. I had a good friend of mine here down in Orlando turn 40 the other day, and we had a group chat. I jokingly said, "Well, warranty expires, bud. Like, prepare to start falling apart." And of course, Becky immediately kicked me in the shins because you're going to get in his head. And then I saw him a few days later, and I totally got in his head. So hearing him complain about all his aches and pains brought me some joy because it made me feel a little bit less alone in the 40-year-old club. And like I used to have to do no stretches, and now I every time I go for a run I have to do hamstring stretches beforehand, and more recently also afterhand. If I don't stretch them, I get random leg pain. But now just to like exist, I have to do mobility and stretching in the morning. And on one hand, when you get older and that phenomenon of feeling like time is moving faster, you feel like time's whizzing by and your life is just flashing before your eyes. And on the other hand, uh, having to do a lot of isometric stretching to try to get your muscles to actually move and to not feel pain from just existence. Nothing makes me want life to pass by faster than when I'm in a stretch. Fuck stretching. That's what this program's all about. Just you and me trying to figure out how to avoid the pain that is existence. Welcome. Uh, so version 40, every breaking change release needs a new title. Needs something that, is brand new. Brand new to me, brand new to the show, brand new to you, I don't know, the world. This one's titled "Go Home, Claude, You're Drunk." Because Claude code is really, really good. It blew me away. We're going to talk a lot about it today. The good and the bad and the ugly. So that'll make more sense later. But first, some life updates. On July 3rd, there was a July 4th party that Becky and Jeremy and I and another friend attended, and we were in a gift store, like, and there was a lot of merch in the gift store, and in the gift store there was what looked like two Mickey hands, like kind of spreading something apart, like on a mug. It was like a mug design with two hands in like a spread formation. And I immediately looked at it and clocked it as like, oh, and I just, because I can't help myself but to say every thought that I have out loud, I clocked it as, whoa, that mug looks a lot like Goatsy. And then realized that the three people with me all turned to me simultaneously and informed me, like, what the fuck is Goatsy? And then I said, oh, well, like it was I don't know, late 90s, very early 2000s internet meme, that I probably first saw on Fark or something, and realizing that like none of these words that I was saying made any sense. And so then one of the fourth friend in the party looks up and says, oh, I'll Google it. And I just immediately was like, oh God, no, no, no. Cause like we're in public. If you don't know what Goatsy is, whatever you do, don't Google GOATSE. Just don't do it. Although I'm sure like you'd probably have to turn off safety features. It is not safe for life. It was a precursor to Rickrolling. If you think Rickrolling is a way to really get at somebody with like a fake link to trick them into clicking a thing, and then it's like, aha, I got you, sucker. Goatsy was that before that was that, and when you got with Goatsy, especially over like a 28K dial-up modem, wasting your time to load this image as it becomes, first interlaced and then blurry and then real and then like sharper and sharper and sharper, and you're like, oh my God, and then you can't burn that off your eyes. So another example of how old I must be. But, some things never change. Right? The internet's still full of awful people. We just, monetize it better. Other life stuff, got home. Like I'd mentioned, every time I seem to go away for a long time, I come home to some kind of fiasco and broken stuff. And we finally we fixed the electrical problem with the fridge. We fixed the unreliability of the internet setup. We think we've converted all the cameras from battery to power over Ethernet. Just yesterday or the other day, we had pavers come in, or people who do like sealing of pavers. Where by pavers I mean, I don't know what I don't. I guess there's a reason they call them pavers because we don't have another good fucking word for them. But like rocks that are the same shape that we arrange into driveway formations and pool decks and so forth, which naturally have cracks in the middle, which means that you get weeds between the cracks. So this company seals those things, and so we got our front and backyard sealed, and supposedly, it only lasts 18 months or 2 years, but still somehow costs $2,000. And unfortunately, I'd kind of signed the quote before they're like, and schedule again in 18 months. I was like, are you fucking serious? Like, pour hot glue down all this shit. And if it only lasts for 2 years, like, find better glue, right? So we handled a lot of that stuff. We finally got it out of the way, and then all of a sudden, boom, a water main breaks down the road, and our house is one of 3,000 houses that were put on a boil water advisory because the water had become contaminated. So if you've never been on a boil water advisory or lived in Flint, Michigan, you might imagine it as being like, oh, that kind of sucks, And I did the thing that like made the most sense to me. I immediately ordered a bunch of ice and bottled water because I didn't actually want to have to boil water to drink it. But then you realize just how many times a day you go up to a sink to do something that involves water going in one of your holes. And so I got some blue painter's tape out and just marked off all of the sinks to remind us, hey, don't brush your teeth with this water. I set down water bottles next to each of them. And that was a little bit of a pain in the ass. But then it got really bad when this thing got extended to like the fourth fucking day. And by then it's, well, you can't run the dishwasher, right? Because that's the bad water. So you can wash dishes by hand, but you can't use the sink water. So then I've got this cauldron of the water that I'd boiled that I kind of let semi-cool so it wouldn't be scalding. And, then do the dishes with that. But then it's like, okay, well, now I got to rinse it. And also the cauldron weighs a fucking ton. And so you're kind of like lifting and pouring and nothing really gets clean. And you're also trying to time it, right? Because like at any minute, the boil water advisory could end, right? So then the idea is, well, if I spend 2 hours washing 10 dishes because I'm bad at this, because this is not how God intended people to wash dishes, it's why he invented dishwashers. If I spend 2 hours on this and then the boil water advisory is lifted the next morning, I'm a fucking dummy. I should have just loaded the dishwasher, waited, and then ran it after they said it. They gave us the all clear. So then trying to time it, right? And they kept extending it just like 1 day at a time. So that dark era is behind us. It's just yet another. I don't think I've had a normal fucking week where I just got to wake up every day and do roughly the same thing or whatever I wanted without some bullshit like that coming in. For at least 3 months. So it's too many months, right? If we only get 80 years and 1/4 of the year is just, I know that the root cause, like if I just lived in a studio apartment by myself in the middle of nowhere, like I could have a simpler life with fewer variables, with fewer things designed to fall apart. But instead I have all this shit going on of my own creation. And then I respond to that by complaining about how often stuff's breaking. And then my solution is apparently fly to Japan and buy a condo. So, I think I might be the problem here. One thing about that boil water advisory is I ordered ice, just ready ice, just from the Publix, just whatever, I was like the 7-pound bags are like $1. But by the time the Instacart guy got there, I wasn't going to go. Fuck that. By the time the Instacart guy got there, it would only been like an hour, but they picked through all the cheap normal ass ice. And they were on to the imported or, shipped from Maine, as in the state at the tippity top part of America. Spring water from Maine ice. It had like Niagara or something kind of like branding. And it was like, real good ice. And I was like, all right, well, this looks terrible. And it was 3 times the price for, half as much ice. And so I opened it up, and immediately it just stank. It really stank. It stank real gross. And I was like, huh, Maine has stanky ass water, I guess. And so I put the ice in my cup, and then I like poured Coke Zero into the cup. And then I took a sip, and, Coca-Cola, strong fucking flavor, aspartame, packs a punch. All I could taste was the stanky ass Maine ice. So if you live in Maine, I hope you have like, I don't know, like a water filter system or something, or like, I don't know if I was being punked. Maybe they're just not sending their best ice all the way down here. Maybe they get first dibs on the good ice, and we're just getting their, sloppy ice seconds. So, sorry, ice from Maine, you fucking suck. We still have some in the freezer, and I don't fucking know why. Like at this point, we just can make our own ice again, and that tastes delicious. And by delicious, I mean doesn't taste like anything because it's fucking ice. If your ice tastes like something, you fucked up. Unless you're making, like, I don't know, like Jello shots or putting vodka in them, or I don't know what people, popsicles? That's probably a more common thing, but for me, I could only imagine alcoholic ice being flavored. I also, at one point, got food sickness over that 4-day span. No idea what that was, other than I was, frankly, this is an explicit language podcast, so and we're friends here, so I'll just say I was shitting my brains out for more than 24 hours, thinking, we're on a boil water advisory, and I've been pretty careful not to drink any of this water, but, I had a Campylobacter infection when I was in Japan, and I lost like 10 pounds and managed to keep it off, so I told Becky about it. She's like, I don't know, man. Maybe this is another good gut biome cleanse for you. And I always appreciate her positive reframing of my life. Speaking of Coca-Cola, we were at a place that had like a complimentary coffee and Coke, and it was right in the middle of the day, and we're kind of in between needing the caffeine and just, having it be too late for coffee. And so I did the thing where you get one of each and then you kind of mix them a little bit. You ever had like Coke with just a little bit of coffee, or coffee with just a little bit of Coke? Like not cocaine, but like Coca-Cola, cocaine-free Coca-Cola. It's so good. It's a real good time. Just black coffee. Every time I do this, I remember Coke Black, which was a product in 2006, 2007, and then discontinued. That was a half-calorie Coca-Cola that had coffee in it, and high fructose corn syrup, because of course it did. It was overpriced, but I remember buying it and loving it and thinking, this is the future. This is what America needs right now. And then Becky and I apparently were the only people on the planet who actually liked Coke. If you liked Coke Black, if you know what the fuck I'm talking, apparently it also came out in France. But if you ever had Coke Black in the mid-aughts, write into the show, podcast@searls.co. I want to be your friend. We've probably got a lot of other shit in common, is my guess. Other shit going on, I've been thinking a lot about how weird my life has become now that I don't have like a normal job. And one of those ways it's weird is when I get a random opportunity or somebody asks for a favor, I can put my back into it in a way that I never would have been able to before. I was in a bar in Tokyo, one of my favorite bars, bartender, he's known me for years. I come and visit probably annually, roughly. And he confided in me. He's like, hey, he's a recording artist. He's like, I'm re-recording my album, or I'm recording a new album, and this song that I've got these English language lyrics that are just Google Translate, and they're not very good. Because he sings in Japanese, of course, and so he's got this lyric sheet that'll hand to guests, like especially if he plays the song in the bar. Yeah, got a guitar up in the wall. And so he hands these lyrics to guests, and, indeed, the lyrics don't really look like song lyrics. They look like, Google Translate of paragraphs of text, and they don't, there's no musicality or rhyme to them. So he's like, "Would you translate this song?" And then later he sent a second song, from from Japanese into English, something like for like, something that would be a good localization. And I said sure because I was drunk, and I put it in my to do tracker because I wasn't that drunk. I apparently can get very very drunk before I get so drunk that I'm not still adding to dos to my to do tracker. Uh, I would love to get that drunk again soon because I have a lot of shit to do. So I look at the to do, and it's been a month, and I sit down. And I'm like, all right, I've got a free afternoon. Let's figure out how to translate a song. And so I did, and it took a while. And I worked with my good buddy ChatGPT, and we figured it out. And it took 3 or 4 revisions. I started from scratch a couple times because you want to get something that is captures the spirit and the essence of it, but not necessarily always the literal words, because how are you going to do that? But also have some musicality, some rhyme, some like similar syllable counts, especially for the pacing of the song. You got to take that into account, listen to the original song. And also for English as a second language, singer, not too convoluted or complex of words, which is, a shortcoming of mine, is it's difficult for me to pick simple words for simple people. And I nailed it. I got it. I got it done. I sent it, and then he can't tell if it's good or bad, so he was really happy too. So mission accomplished. I don't know if it's going to go in the liner notes, or if he's just going to print it and hand it to his customers. But that was pretty neat. We were also in a part of our reverse culture shock of being back in America for just a few weeks. Went to a movie theater, and man, movie theaters have never been great. But post COVID, they're just so much worse. Even the popular ones, like, and there's a million ways in which they're worse. And I don't want to spend an hour talking about why the movie industry is fucked and a bad experience. And if I could just pay $100 to watch the fucking thing in my home theater, I would. Which is sad because Becky and I used to really like the movie theater going experience. But this one in particular really killed me. We're in the Dolby Cinema. We got like the best seats in the middle, because you if you buy a few days early, you're like, I want to get center seats and I want to get them up close enough, but not too close. And you kind of like, you're looking at the little diagram and you're like, where is that going to fall in this theater? And if you don't know the theater, it's not a distance accurate, illustration. So we knew the seats, we knew the layout. We were like, this is the Dolby Laser Cinema one. It's the best quality theater projector that they got. We got the seats. You get in, and you're not even late, but you get in, and of course there's a family sitting in your seats. And I'm not going to talk about the demographics of this family other than to say, like, if I were to be stereotyping what kind of family it would be them. And so it was, hey, sorry, but like this looks like D5 and D6. Like, I think you might be in our seats. And then like, it would be one thing if there was like, the way to react to that is like, oh shit, I'm sorry. And then somebody looking at a phone and being like, oh, look, we're actually in E5 and E6 and E7 or whatever. And then but it wasn't that. It was just like, oh, all right. Okay. And then they kind of like, they've already made a huge mess of the seats, and then they go over, to the seats literally right next to me on the right. And I'm like, oh, so those are your seats then, right? Because like, when you go to the fancier theater packages, right? Like, they all differentiate the ticket pricing. So it's probably like fucking, I don't know, $25 a ticket, at least $30 a ticket. Yeah, it was like 25 a ticket and that was after all of the AMC premiere discounts and bullshit. God damn it. So I don't blame them, right? Can't afford to go, sneaking in. I'm not a goddamn snitch unless you do literally anything to inconvenience me, in which case I will be speaking to a manager. Uh, but they may, I don't know what they did. Maybe they bought tickets to a different, like a cheaper theater, and then they just walked into that one. So then they're sitting next to me, and fine, whatever, sure, the seat is already uncomfortably warm from their asses. That's not my problem. Like, it'll get better, right? I found a candy wrapper on my thing, from that they took from outside the theater, which you're not supposed to do. And then trailers start, and immediately you realize they've got like some 3-year-old fucking girl who is not interested in the movie. It's not necessarily particularly age appropriate, and she's immediately screaming her head off and climbing over stuff she's climbing on top of the chair. So she's like a like how if I had a cat climbing on a sofa next to you, it was like that. I don't mean to compare children to animals, except I have no other experience to tell me they're any different. And so she's climbing up there and she's getting like really close to me. And then she's screaming at her mom, I want popcorn, because she sees my popcorn. I'm like, this is a great movie going experience, and I'm sure she's going to get with the program the minute that the trailers are over, and then we're going to watch the movie, and she's going to be a very well-behaved film goer, was my thought. That thought was immediately proven incorrect, as the entire first 10 minutes of the film was just her screaming and then her parents doing absolutely fuck all to like quiet her down. And yeah, that was pretty neat. So eventually, the mom takes her on a little walk. I think so they get up and they leave the theater and they walk around and then they come back. Maybe and I'm like, wow, this movie is really great when there's not a screaming fucking infant. Like, this is a really good movie all of a sudden. Then they come back and then immediately it's with the fucking gymnastics and the jungle gym crap. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to be that guy. Like, why is it always me being that guy? Like, does everyone else just not fucking care about their life experience? And so you're like, I'm looking around, and either no one notices or they're just like successfully able to tune out the nonsense and watch the fucking movie, which I cannot do. All my head's thinking is like, how do I ensure that these people receive karmic retribution for their actions? I realize I am the villain in the superhero movie, and that's fine with me because at least, I think the most important thing to be is emotionally authentic and self-aware. So I'm winning. I turn and I break. I got almost halfway through the movie and I'm like, I'm sorry, but like, this is really disruptive. You take care of it. And enough to scare the guy, because at this point he knows that I can tell that he didn't pay for tickets to this movie. And so I think it's only because of that extra little bonus on top that he actually responded. They scrum together. She walks the girl away again, and then she comes back alone. Where's the 3-year-old? One is left to ask. And so now I've got this secondary question. It's like, did she was gone just long enough to conceivably, maybe, possibly have gone to a car? And it's like 100 fucking degrees out. It's because it's an early movie. And I'm like, did she just take a child and put it in a hot car? Maybe cracked a window with an iPad or something? And then come back to the movie? Because clearly they were at the movie to watch the movie themselves. I realize I'm spending a lot of time on this, but trust me, it's not important. So now my brain goes immediately from feeling glad that there's no longer screaming in the theater to not feeling guilty, but feeling potentially liable in a wrongful death suit if it turns out that, like, I doubt that they had a Tesla with dog mode, which you are not supposed to use with children. That's why they call it dog mode. But, as I mentioned previously, small pets and small children share a lot of fundamental biological, traits. So having an air-conditioned car that or something like that, whatever, even with a screen in the back. But like, I'm not imagining that. I'm imagining this child has been left to wander Disney Springs all by herself, or is in a car somewhere. And then, I felt really bad for 3 seconds, and then I was watching the movie and it was fine. And the movie was really good. So that was cool. All right. Well, that's about enough life stuff for me. Let's get on with it. I've been living dangerously. So I've been talking about Claude Code a lot. Claude, if you're just like a normie who's not a programmer, Claude is a competitor to ChatGPT. It is made by a company called Anthropic. I think that it's like their acronym is PVC, which I assume stands for private company or private corporal first class or something. Probably private company. I don't know. Which has vague UK vibes. I have not researched any of this, but that's just setting the table. Claude, is frankly, like, whether the model's better than ChatGPT or worse than ChatGPT, I couldn't tell you. I could just tell you, like, the Mac app isn't nearly as good as ChatGPT's Mac app, and so I don't use it, really. I can tell you for sure that it's not as good at multilingual shit, because if you open the fucking Mac app and then you paste Japanese text in, you just get those question boxes. So it can't even do UTF encoding correctly, which is, totally worth that $100 billion valuation that they got. No, and, separate. This isn't in the news section. I read an article that, like, AI uptake is lowest in Japan among almost every developed country. It's like 26% of people have used an AI tool in the last 12 months. And I kind of don't blame them, because, like, a lot of these tools are not only not marketed to them, but sort of don't work. Like, if you use even on the fucking iPhone app for ChatGPT, if you're using the Japanese input editor, like, it will just, like, fuck up and just and not input what the IME is, like, actually generate, like the kanji characters. Like, it just won't work. And so sometimes I have to go into the Notes app and write what I want to tell ChatGPT there, and then copy paste it. And if you're editing a message, just fucking forget about it. So I get it. Anyway, Claude is a worse ChatGPT for most intents and purposes, but they have two models. Their newest, Claude 4, it comes in like two variants that are highly relevant to programming computers. One is called Sonnet, which is kind of like the workhorse. Imagine it like I'm good at writing a function of code. Like, you give me arguments A and B, and I output some value C. Like the kind of dink and dunk, just very basic, program me a function that does this, that adds these two numbers together or whatever. Sonnet is generally considered to be good for that. And then Opus is more of an orchestration layer. It looks at the big picture, so it doesn't miss the forest for the trees. It's better at planning. It's better to, like, not maybe it's a reasoning model. I don't really know how all that works internally, but the idea being, like, it's more appropriate for, like, coding architectural tasks and big picture stuff, project comprehension. Now, separate from the Mac application, they have a terminal app called Claude Code, and it's all multi-platform. I'm saying Mac because I'm not a Windows girl, and they have Claude Code is this terminal app that runs in a full screen terminal. It feels, if you're not a programmer, it looks and feels very hacker like, but you can just open it up into any project, and you can type in, hey, make project do things, fix bug here, add more rainbow graphics, and it'll try to do the thing. And then everything else that you do as a programmer from that point on isn't write code. It's kind of like corral Claude into a higher probability of landing at a good outcome. So we talked about this a lot. If you caught 39.0.1, which is our first hot fix episode that was on the feed, me and Dave Mosier, we were discussing AI stuff. And Claude Code factors in heavily because it's currently the best of breed way to, like, do project level code. Like, help me take this project forward, help me do these tasks, use these tools, and you can set the agent to go forth and do shit. And I've got it wired up now so that when it finishes its work, my watch gets buzzed via a push notification, and then I can tab back over, go walk over to my MacBook, see what's up, and give it further instructions or evaluate its work. It's pretty cool. Couple downsides. One, if you want it to be useful and not be interrupting you constantly for, like, permission to read a file or run a very basic command that does things like list how many files are in a folder, like, you got to be there, like, giving it permission constantly. And that's just no way to live, right? Because, like, now if the goal is the agent does its own thing and runs itself and gets shit done, like it shouldn't be asking me for permission to do very, very basic tasks. But there's a flag, and the flag is something like, dangerously bypass permissions. And it says right on the tin, like, this is dangerous. Like, it could go in RMRF. It could delete your whole fucking drive. It could expose your credentials. It could text your nudes to, your wife. Wait, I don't know. Affair stuff, I'm not good at affair because I've never had one. If you've had an affair and you're good at it, you can write in anonymously at podcast@surreals.co. I'm always looking for salacious email. That's going to go to the top of the mailbag, I'll tell you what. So anyway, if you want to get anything done, you kind of, a lot of people won't admit to it, but if pressed, will be like, yeah, I kind of just run in that, like, give it access to my entire fucking computer mode. And then, of course, the next thing say, but it's very important that you sandbox it in a VM or into a Docker container or something. And then you ask, well, are you doing that? And they're like, no, because that would be slower. So I keep an eye on it, and then I try to be nice to it most of the time, and hope that it doesn't delete my whole fucking. But that's what backups are for, and it's also what, like, fortunately at Surreals LLC, I've got zero fucking secrets, and if it were to leak my entire life online, that would just be like people would get bored because it's even less curated than all the other shit that I already put about myself online. So I'm not super worried, to be honest. Although then I realized the app that I was having it build, Posse Party, even in development, it has all of the social media credentials to 8 different platforms. So it's got API keys right there in the Rails development database to YouTube, to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to Blue Sky, to Mastodon, to Threads, to don't call it Twitter. And I was thinking, yeah, if it fucks up, like, it could write a test script that just, like, tries to send these cross posts manually, and, like, now I could be accidentally having the agent just generate a bunch of random ass Blue Sky toots out of nowhere. And I thought, like, no, that's not good. And I added some rules to stop it from doing that, but then it misread the rules and started doing that. And so then I had about 300 fucking Mastodon toots to go through and delete. So that was pretty neat. Yeah, I don't know. You give a teenager the keys to your car. Don't be surprised if it flips it, I guess. But it did get some good stuff done. It got a lot of good stuff done. In fact, I was so productive over the holiday weekend, over the 4th of July weekend, that I kind of cleared the major stuff in the Posse Party backlog for me to call it basically 1.0 done. Refresh the design, get the dark mode working, like a lot of little visual kind of stuff, get embeds working, embed previews of, like, what the post looks like, so I can kind of, when one of my blog posts will cross post over to something like Blue Sky, I can go into Posse Party and see an embed and be like, it looks like that. Adding an API so that I can get, for all of my post IDs, I can get, like, the list of URLs to the social media posts. That way, like, if I were to want to share links to my blog, I could do that. Although I'm not convinced I want to do that. So it implemented a lot of that stuff. And I was so impressed, I wrote a blog post called Full Breadth Developers about how, like, I can't tell you if this is the future. I don't have any fucking clue where all of this stuff is going. I can just say that if, like, we have technology that's this good already, it's probably going to have some kind of impact. And you should probably, if your employment is a going concern, you should probably pay attention to this. Even if you're totally opposed to it, like, don't get blindsided when expectations at your job suddenly change, right? Don't get caught off guard when, nobody at your company is actually handwriting code anymore. For better or for worse, right? Like, you can have all kinds of arguments if it's a good thing, if it's a bad thing, if it's ethical, if it's not, if it's legal, if it's not. But, like, if the world seems to be changing in this direction, and this tool is generally available, especially to anyone willing to pay $200 for the working version, really. $200 is a lot cheaper than a programmer, right? So I wrote this post to kind of, like, try to get people thinking about it. And then basically from the minute that I wrote the post until last night at 4 p.m., Claude Code, it was like it had a lobotomy. It was so fucking, it was no smarter than that girl cat climbing and screaming in the movie theater in terms of getting anything done. I would say things like, hey, add margin top to this div, like add some top margin above this flash message, right? Because it's flush with its container right now. And it literally, like, added a helper function to another part of the page so that it could add bottom padding to that, so that it, in its thoughts, would approximate top margin on the thing itself. But of course, it had the opposite effect as well. And then I always tell it, hey, take a screenshot, look at it, visualize, did it do it? It's like, yes, it did it completely. and I'm looking at the screenshot that it generated of itself, and then I would like paste the screenshot back into itself. It's like, can you tell me what's wrong here? And then it would like also be completely wrong about what was wrong there. And then I check the model selector inside of Claude Code, and I'm like, all right, well, are you on Opus, the smarter one? And it says it is. So like it would be suddenly really, really dumb. And I take to Reddit, and so I start reading the Claude AI Reddit, and every single post in the last week and a half has been, wow, this thing got really dumb really fast. So I kind of feel baited and switched. Hence the title. Claude, go home, you're drunk. We'll talk about it more because it made the tech press. But yeah, what I realized was that all of the Claude Code infrastructure is in the USA, which is fine, right? Like, if you're in Japan using it, like, yeah, you get a little bit more latency, but like each of these commands takes 10, 20 seconds to run. So it's not the end of the world. And there's, export regulations with GPUs and all that. So whatever. But also like almost all the usage, it seems like, is in the USA. And this is where a lot of the money is in this, and where the expectations are higher. And so I think AI adoption is just higher. And so 9 to 5, and I first saw this mentioned on Reddit about a week ago. Not from 9 to 5, Claude is basically just fucking moronic. It'll just make all kinds of mistakes. But then once you get into like nights and weekends, or especially if you're like up early, like if you're up at 6 a.m. using it in Eastern Standard Time, like it is, or daylight time, I never know, Eastern Time. If you're in Eastern Time at 6 a.m., like this thing's phenomenal, and it writes great code. And it actually does what you tell it to do. And so there's rate limiting, which is, oh, you've used too much of the thing and now you can't use it anymore. And then there is, I don't know, like some kind of throttling happening, right? Or maybe like, because it's, I'm imagining a server that's getting slammed with requests, and normally it would spend, maybe allocate to each request a large part of the Plinko board so that, like the decisions can have like more time to make decisions, I don't know, like more capacity for thinking, for good, productive work. And then when it gets slammed, there's less. And that affects the perceived cognition or cognitive abilities of the tool. And this is that there's like evidence of this. And as soon as I posted something about this, that like Claude is just working for the weekend, and if you want to get anything done, like try it on a weekend or try it late at night or early in the morning, I got a whole bunch of replies saying like, yes, this is exactly how it works. And the fact that we live in a world where this is how anything works, and it's purportedly the next big thing. And granted, we're in a big moment of change, and none of this is going to be true 3 months from now because everything's constantly cycling over. But like, this is an especially fucked era where it's like we finally have tools that can do all these things, but under such weird goddamn conditions. Yep. So that was some stuff to follow up on. in case you missed it. The other thing that I did recently was I put out a newsletter called I haven't started yet, describing how somehow I'm 18 months into having the freedom to work on the one thing that I meant to do, which was build a language acquisition app for Apple platforms. And I have failed to even start, because originally it was clearing the deck of stuff that I'd been deferring. Then it was helping Becky build her business. Then it was giving a talk at Rails World about it. And so in the newsletter, I kind of detail all this stuff out and I give a timeline. And then it was, well, like I want to be able to share in the open as I'm learning Swift and all the Apple tooling and stuff. And so having it all syndicate in a way that's more reliable than my, silly collection of broken toys. I should build an app that syndicates all my blog shit and maybe even share it with other people, right? And that's how Posse Party started. And now it's, it's July of 25 when I started in January of 24, right? So it's like 18 months and I haven't even started the app yet. And I'm realizing, and I talk about this a little bit, like a lot of it's just fear of starting and trying new things. A lot of it's, like you got to take the first little bit and kind of like iterate and make your way. A lot of it's excuses, waiting for the next version of iOS that's going to have the LLMs on board or whatever. Uh, and ultimately, I got to figure out how to like rip off the band-aid and just start doing the thing, and that will mean letting go of shit. That will mean doing less. And so, currently reevaluating what the fuck to do with Posse Party. I change my mind every day on whether I'm just going to cancel it altogether, open source it, sell it as like a once app that you could self-host. If you have strong opinions about this, let me know. Maybe even selling it to a company that wants to be in this business, and operate it as a SaaS product. I don't fucking know. Yeah, I am genuinely in a state of reflection about this. I think that I've got a plan, and hopefully by breaking change version 41, I will have broken ground on this thing. But it was an unusually vulnerable thing for me to write because I try really hard to always put on a not a smile, but like a brave face to the world in how I write, and what I choose to share, because I was always so terrified of outing myself as, I don't know, a flawed human, and that might make people work with me less, right? And of course, I'm happy to talk about my flaws when they might be cultural touch points, like goatse, for example. If you know, you know, and some of the best clients in the world totally know what goatse is, and they think I'm cool because I'm talking about goatse. I figured that out early. But like saying stuff like, yeah, I wasted 18 months of my life building products that probably don't matter for no good reason other than like my dad had just died and I was kind of, afraid to start a thing I was passionate about, and then I let time get away from me and I kind of like lost track of my vision along the way. Like, I guess I guess saying it's because I had a close relative die kind of gives me a pass. But like, even in lieu of that excuse, right? That I was, you know, that I lacked vision and clarity of purpose at any point is kind of off brand for me. But I did, and here I am, and I'm just trying to hit reset, because it it can be really hard to break a routine and just to do stuff differently. But in Becky, I've got a wonderful partner, and we sit down together and we make plans. And when we're off track, we can hold each other accountable, and we can also come up with like systems of accountability, like switching schedule around, and like kind of rules of engagement about how we live our life, and use that as a prompt to kind of push ourselves in the direction that we deep down believe we should be going, even if it's uncomfortable or hard to get started, or there's a more comfortable alternative, like faffing about on your computer with stuff that's familiar, which is what I had been doing. I don't know about you, but I could use a pun palate cleanser, so I'm going to force upon you one of Aaron's puns. As you may know, every one of these programs comes with a pun at the bottom of the box. And just like the toy at the bottom of the Cracker Jack box, where toy is a exaggeration, it is a term of art for something that is very much, just some piece of fucking plastic that you don't know what it is. These are jokes. And we're going to see how they go. Some of them are genuinely very good. Many of them are technically puns. And I read them on air. Aaron Patterson writes it for me. He uses invisible ink. And then I read it on air, having not read it yet. And then I rank them along the other puns. So that's why this is a two-monitor situation. Because down here, I got the pun I'm about to read. I got my notes. I got the camera. And then up here, I've got my list. Here we go. The version 40 pun from Aaron. Smile. I feel like AI coding assistants are just token developers. I feel like AI coding assistants are just token developers. How's that sit with you? I'm a token developer, you know, like as in like a token black guy, like there to fill a, you know, to check a box, right? In a script or something. A token developer. I don't know what a token developer is in that context, right? Like in what has anyone used the phrase token developer outside of this exact context, right? Like, oh, he's just a token developer. I guess you could use sort of like token to mean a blase standard issue non-exceptional, but I think that's a potential misuse of the word token. But I could be wrong. He could have meant token, like TOK apostrophe N, like a developer getting high, which is actually spot on for where Claude's been this week. I feel like AI coding assistants are just token developers. So I'm harping on that, but of course the joke is all of the AI APIs are based on how many tokens they have to pass into the LLM and then they come out of the LLM, where a token is, I don't know, think of it like a syllable. It's not, but it's a complicated definition. And so you look at your token count to figure out what's your API cost and things like that. And so it's you sent up 700 tokens, you come back 35,000 tokens, and you pay per token. Sometimes just a general fee for tokens. Sometimes you're paying a subscription, so you don't care about how many tokens are getting used. But AI coding assistants are just token developers. I think this is a case where, regardless of the technical definition of the adjective token, I like the spirit with which he's. I like the energy. I think that directionally, it's a good pun. Not a great pun, but it's a good pun. Let's try to figure out where it stacks up in the season 2 rankings. So this will be our 13th pun for this season. We'll do the bisect algorithm again. So I'll start in the middle and see if it's better or worse than number 6. The problem with insurance company ads is all of their bold claims. That is a better pun than this. So we'll go down to 9. I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel for physicists and calling it mass media. This is in that range, I think. It's around there. 33, I bought a new camera and I'm having a hard time learning how to use it. Sorry, number 8. Bought a new camera, having a hard time learning how to use it. No matter what I do, it just doesn't click. Last time around, I complained about not loving it. I think it's just the word choice click there could have been better, but otherwise it's also kind of the similar vibe. Number 7 is it took me a while to figure out how to get my boat to float, but then I let it sink in. I think that's better than than the new token one. I heard most cars are designed by a steering committee is number 10. And I think this one's better than that because that's too close to the Laffy Taffy. Could have just been a popsicle stick joke. I think I'm going to say this is the new number 8. Just because the mass media one, even though it's like, yes, mass is a word that we associate with physicists, like it never clicks with me. So the new number 8 pun. Wait, nope. Sorry. The new number 9 pun. My bad. I feel like AI coding assistants are just token developers. Thank you, Aaron. You did your part. Yeah, some people have written in to say they don't love this segment, but I'm a creature of habit, and if I did one episode without one of Aaron's puns, then what would even the show be? But anyway, let's talk about some news. As is often the case, news has been happening since the last major version. We got a smattering of the usual tech, gaming, AI, economy, bullshit. Not, I wouldn't say a ton. This might be a short episode, he said, being incorrect every time he said that. Washington Post has a story. Note-taking AI is outnumbering participants on meetings. Apparently, I left the daily employment game just before, like, just as some of these tools were coming online, right? Where you'd see somebody join a Zoom call and it's like a note taker. And it's just like, all right, well, it's a bot and it's recording the conversation. So be on your best behavior. And then it's going to go through some summarizer and it's going to email somebody at the end. And of course, very often my experience has been like no one in the call knows whose bot it is, but they're just like, okay. Or somebody would be like, oh, I have installed, can't figure out how to make it stop. It's part of it now. This post article, it's pretty depressing. Where apparently like a lot of people are just not going to meetings anymore, and they tend to be higher up in the organization. And so, situations where you might have 2 or 3 people who are like, the deciders, the leadership who are trying to make a decision, and then they kind of just expect everyone else to have it out and brainstorm and come to something, and then they can asynchronously just get a summary email so they don't have to sit on calls all day. It sort of feels like that is kind of fucked. Because who makes us all be on the fucking phone all the time, right? Like the reason we have so many meetings, the reason that we have so many Zooms in the first place is that the managerial class and the executive class, they typically don't work with their hands. They typically are not practitioners of production of some kind. They are talkers. They're the ones scheduling the fucking meetings. They're the ones like creating these layered systems that require so much synchronous communication. And then to not even show up, so like whether they called the meeting or not, like, they're the reason the meeting's probably happening. And so if I was in a meeting, the decision maker flaked and just sent an AI bot, I would hope that I'd have the courage to nope out of that whole situation. I'd be like, I'm just going to build the fucking thing. Like, if you guys want to talk to the robot, go nuts. Some choice excerpts. I want to talk to people, said Sellers, who runs a content agency for entrepreneurs out of Birmingham, Alabama. I don't want to talk to a bunch of note takers, he said, before adding that he has occasionally himself sent an AI note taker to meetings in his place. Cool. Miller makes a habit of turning off her AI note taker for the last 5 minutes of every meeting because she believes their presence can stifle discussion. At this point, participants' shoulders drop. People get more open and the real questions come out, she said. So you got an hour-long meeting, and you carry the conscious belief and or knowledge that people are being more reserved, less creative, higher anxiety, because a robot is recording everything that they do and then summarizing it and reporting it and recording it for history into some document somewhere. And you know that this has a negative impact on whatever the purpose of the call is. But in the last 5 minutes, you let your hair down and you're just like, yeah, let's just us girls. Are you fucking serious? Like, we often talk about how in business, one of the huge problems with like full-time W-2 employment of having a team of people who are on salary is that when everyone's on salary, especially if everyone's got like, more complex, convoluted, compensation schemes like stock grants and warrants that might be a 3-year, 5-year time horizon, the value of a marginal hour of a person's time is basically zero, right? It's like, well, they could work another hour of overtime because they're salary, or like they're not going to see a payoff for several years, so they should be bought in on this, like making profit. Like, you would have to so not value your own and other people's time to think, we're going to have ineffective meetings for 55 minutes, and in the last 5 minutes, that's where the truth wins out. But because we've also habituated ourselves to only taking notes via the AI note taking app, that no one's going to actually record any of the decisions that we make in that precious 5 minutes, we're really just going to kind of have this cathartic release at the end. Like, I think meetings are pretty fucking stupid. I'm going to put that out there. I think meetings, like, I'm a not particularly social person, but I'm like, I don't know. I get a lot of shit done. I like to think I'm pretty smart. I like to think that I'm actually a fairly good communicator. And I think most meetings are just absolutely fucking god awful. They don't have purpose. People don't understand why they're in the room. There's not an arc of getting the right people, agreeing on what the agenda is, having genuine, useful brainstorming, because most people in fucking companies don't have any good ideas anyway, so what's the fucking point of consulting them? Generating a bunch of ideas that are all valid and interesting and feasible, instead of just like giving everyone their turn to offer up another stupid fucking idea, and then try to be inclusive, acknowledge that your idea is good and there's no bad, sure, brainstorming, that's fine. You can have that fluffy duffy first half of the conversation, and then the second half of the conversation should be ruthless winnowing down of the possibility space into, this is the decision, and there's somebody in the room who's not just a fucking AI note taker, somebody in the room who has the authority or the responsibility to arrive at one decision of many possibilities, needs to say, thanks for your feedback, I think we should go this way. Anyone want to say their piece before we do? And then you get some kind of consensus or buy-ins, like, everyone cool with this? All right, this is the direction we're taking. That's a good hour-long meeting tends to look like that, tends to have that arc. I have been in maybe 3 meetings like that in 20 years. Right? And they were all with like the same 2 or 3 people who are actually like fucking good at their jobs. Most of the time, the people calling the meeting, the people wanting to be in the meeting, the people wanting to have meetings are like incompetent. And in general, like when you look at middle management layers, a lot of those people are like, it's almost like there's the people in the organization who actually get shit done, and then there's the people in the organization who have been sequestered in the org chart to the meeting hell, and they all just meeting with each other, and now they AI note take with each other, and then their only work product other than that is like Notion documents and wiki articles and whatever internal documentation or Google Docs that no one's ever going to fucking read because they don't matter. And then you end up with like 55 duplicative kinds of policy documents, and like, these are our, beliefs, or our standard operating procedures, or our way, or our workflow, or our temple beliefs, or whatever it is. You got 55 different unrelated strategies because they can't say no, because it's just this need for the mind that focuses on like consensus is the way to and communication and involvement and getting everyone's ideas. Like, there's not like an end to the sentence typically. And then it's no surprise to me that like managers and executive types who tend to be a little bit more action oriented and tend to want to get to the decision, but very often, at least in recent history, have been trained by all of their handlers and coaches that you can't be too direct or Gen Z and millennials will fucking revolt, right? Like, no wonder they're sending the AI note takers, because then they get the email and then they're like, reply all, we're going to do this, right? So like, if you like meetings for the sake of meetings, I guess maybe this isn't a problem. But if this isn't like a smell that like maybe it is the meetings that are stupid, like, I don't know what the fuck is. So, news. Arcane, it's a game studio based in Lyon, France. It used to be based in Austin, Texas, and Lyon, France, but then Microsoft relieved them of the Austin office last month. The Austin one had made games like Prey, and the Lyon office has made games like Dishonored 1 and 2. Or maybe, I don't know who made 2, but like Dishonored, a lot of the what are called ImSim games, or immersive sim games. And Arcane's founder was always a little bit of a firebrand. They are like extremely French. And he went on a bit of a tirade, which I think is completely valid. that, as reported by Video Games Chronicle, that like Xbox Game Pass, which is a subscription service where you can pay $10 to $25 a month or something, 10 to 15, 17, 20. The prices are kind of all over the place depending on how many months of a subscription you buy up front, whatever, whether you have Ultimate or Core or whatever. But anyway, you pay Microsoft some amount of money for a subscription, and it gets you access to a metric fuck ton of good games. And because Microsoft owns a lot of the studios now, all of the Microsoft owned studios are basically expected to release their games day and date onto Game Pass. So you could either pay $70 like a fucking dummy, or you could be paying $15 or already have a Game Pass subscription and just play it there, included in your subscription. Now, if you want to get the collector's edition or any other DLC, they're happy to upsell you. But the basic gist is, as a consumer, like if you want to play, if you're like me and you tend to play the fuck out of like a handful of games a year and you like AAA games, Game Pass is an incredible deal, because I used to be a dummy and I used to spend $70 or $60 on a game, and I would play it for 5 minutes and be like, and then buy another one and then buy another one. I basically I owned almost every GameCube game somehow. I worked at Blockbuster and EB Games. I had discounts in both places. And I spent basically my entire paycheck in high school on GameCube games. I had a binder, because there were too many cases, right? Like to fill up my shelf. I had a binder with basically every game. And I looked at it, I found it in 2019 or something. My parents were getting ready to move. And it was so depressing. It was just like, man, that was a lot of money. And in inflation adjusted terms, it's even more. And now I have like a Game Pass subscription that, doesn't cost me very much. And I can't remember the last time I bought a game was Civilization 7, because it wasn't on Game Pass. And I booted it up and I was like, this isn't very good. This isn't scratching the itch like Civ sometimes does. And I probably should have asked for a refund, but I missed my window. But other than that, that was maybe the only game that I actually purchased in 2.5 years. So anyway, that's what Game Pass is. And the founder of Arcane, which is now through a series of transactions owned by Microsoft, so that's a relevant piece here, he's since left and started his own other thing. But he basically slams Game Pass and is like, look, yes, this awesome subscription that kind of gives you all of these great games for a low monthly price is great for consumers, but it's terrible for the industry. It's terrible for individuals who are running studios and trying to figure out, how am I going to price my game in a market that has 70% of the attention consumed by free-to-play games like Fortnite, relatively free, Minecraft, Apex Legends, like a handful of games that are like, a revolving door of free-to-play, monetized in other ways through cosmetics or battle passes or something. And how am I going to compete? If I'm competing with free, I need to make money somehow. I need to make this money back. And then on top of it, all of the other AAA single player games or whatever that I'm up against are being heavily subsidized by Microsoft in either, they own the studios and they're making it and they're willing to take a loss on Game Pass, or they do sweetheart deals with Game Pass such that you play for 5 hours and you get a nickel. It's basically moving to like the Spotify and Apple Music model for funding game development. And that, that's worked for artists. If by worked for artists, you mean, well, now artists realize that they can't actually make money by producing the music. They make money through selling merch and fan clubs and concert tickets. But there's not like some equivalent for video game developers. So he makes a really good point that Game Pass is really, really bad for the industry, especially if you want, a lot of creative AAA games to be produced, and having it all kind of gated behind 1 or 2, 3 platform holders who also have to be the main investors in these things. The idea of an indie game that makes money outside of winning the approval and or the explicit funding of the studios. I said studios because it's very similar to movie studios, as if like right now, as technology has marched along, the iPhone camera is so good that anyone with a fucking phone can produce a really, really slick movie, right? If you put your mind to it. Game development tools are kind of getting there in a sense, but like the monetization side of it is equally fucked to the movie industry at this point. So yeah, that's This would be harder, I think, if Game Pass was not profitable. But according to Microsoft, Game Pass itself is profitable, which is amazing and can't possibly be true. And however they're counting that is challenging. But it does feel for sure like it's at some point another shoe is going to drop. Microsoft will lose interest. They're already having massive layoffs. Like it'll be a lot of back catalog and library stuff. But like by then, like we're seeing such a contraction in the gaming industry right now that I wanted to call that out because I think it's interesting. Of like the perspective of gamers is like, yeah, Game Pass is fucking great because I don't have to pay you money for your video game that you spent all your life savings to build. And from the perspective of like the game makers, it's like this is a raw deal, but like structurally, we don't have another way to succeed in this market. So that sucks. Flag a URL from Windows Central because they're one of the only places that are talking about this outside of podcast land, but a lot of gaming podcasts are discussing now. And some are lamenting, like former people who worked on Xbox originally, like the hardware teams, lamenting the fact that like Microsoft's Xbox group has been pretty open about the fact that like the future of Xbox is Windows. It's a more open console. It's open hardware that you can, if you want to buy your games through Xbox Store, great. If you want to use Game Pass, great. Those are the golden path. Those will always be very easy. And that's what they're optimizing for. And they've been telegraphing this for a while, not just on PC and not just on this new handheld that they're producing with Asus, but on whatever the next Xbox console hardware is. They know that if it's exclusive to just playing Microsoft's Xbox games, because that's not where most people's digital library is, like it's going to fail in the market, just like the Xbox Series X and S have. The way that they plan on differentiating is, and they've been pretty clear, if you read the tea leaves, is by letting you install Steam on whatever they call an Xbox that sits underneath your TV. Steam has big picture mode, Epic has its own launcher. You'll probably be able to install whatever. You might need a USB keyboard to make Epic work. But like the idea being like you'll buy a game console and instead of having the game console be heavily subsidized, if you can just buy an Xbox, assuming it's going to be like $400, $500, right? So heavily subsidized because it's a comparable amount of power to like $1,000, $1,100 computer. I suspect, like, if half the users are buying these subsidized pieces of hardware, immediately installing Steam, and then never paying for an Xbox game, like the economics don't work, right? So the question here is like, if what happens if Microsoft, like, if that subsidy is no longer if Microsoft's not being made whole on the back end through game sales? So do we end up with a $900 console from Microsoft that's sold at cost, or just enough to get them a little bit of margin to make it worth their while to design, develop, and distribute, this hardware? And then that goes up against a $700 PlayStation 6, but like enough people value their Steam library and the openness, or maybe they want Game Pass like I do, that they opt for the Xbox instead. Like, I think that's a very interesting proposition. But when the gamers start to say, well, but like it won't be subsidized and like it's going to be really risky, the question posed here is like, well, what do? And you think about it for a little bit, right? You think about like, well, what could you do there? I think there's already a really good example of another product that is subsidized and it behaves differently if you don't pay to unlock it differently. Like, if you go to the Amazon store and you try to buy a Kindle, right? Depending on whether you click, like which model and which ad you click or how you get there, you may be presented with a Kindle that is unlocked and unfettered, like the full price Kindle. Like if you go to Best Buy, maybe like you'll get a full priced Kindle. If you go to Amazon store through just the search because they're trying to prioritize the lowest price and you click, you'll get it defaults selected to Kindle with special offers, right? And that's basically a Kindle, but when it's asleep, you just see an ad, right? And if you tap it the wrong way, you open the ad to go to another book or whatever, or Kindle Unlimited. And then you can pay at post-purchase if you have a Kindle with special offers, you can pay $35, $45 or whatever to unlock it, and then you can control what's on the lock screen, which is whatever you want, which is probably nothing, or maybe the name of the book that you're currently reading. I don't know. So, think about it, right? Like, if I had a console that was like $700, $800, an Xbox that I was trying to sell, you could sell an unlocked version, and then you could just sell a locked version for $200 less. Like, yeah, if you pay us $600 and you can the full system, it's just it only works with Xbox games and Xbox Game Pass. A certain number of customers, they'd be fine with that, or maybe they'd start off with that, or maybe you could sell it with like we it's available for $5.99 if you buy direct from Microsoft.com, and a 2-year commitment to buying Game Pass, right? Which is enough to make up the margin, and then that way they don't have the sticker shock. Like, these are solvable problems, but everyone's acting like this is some kind of impossible math that's going to completely upend the entire console market. Yep, that's all I want to say about that. I just want to plant that prediction in the sand, because gaming is pretty fucked. But I actually think like Microsoft, in spite of laying a bunch of people off and making everyone hate them at every single possible turn, is like fairly well positioned all of a sudden. All it took was 10 years in the wilderness. Apple, I don't know how they're going to brand this if and when they do it, but they filed a patent for a new kind of stacked image sensor. If you have an iPhone, your camera sensor is almost certainly manufactured by Sony. Sony has been making the camera sensors in basically every iPhone, maybe every iPhone. And those sensors have a certain number of what are called HDR stops, or dynamic range stops. Basically like something to do with the range of luminance that the sensor can perceive, from very, very dim levels to very, very high bright levels, getting the full range of color and the least amount and a minimal amount of noise. And there's a certain number of stops. And apparently Apple has a new patent out saying like, hey, like, not only will this have way more fucking levels of gradation of being able to get dynamic range at a high level of quality and a low level of noise than not just the current iPhone, not just Sony's best sensors, and not just the most fancy professional grade, video cameras, but better dynamic range than the human eye for the first time, right? So we talk about Retina displays and better than Retina, where unless you're like holding the thing right up to your eyes, it's more pixels than your eye can perceive. So it's effectively like an infinite. It's like the ideal display, right? Like you've crossed the point of human perceptibility. Like we've done that with audio quality now years and years ago, where people can't tell the difference between this level of audio quality and this higher one unless they convince themselves that they're superhuman. Who's to say anything's going to come of this one? But I think it's really interesting, right? Like if Apple were to move, Tim Cook doctrine and all that, and like wants to control all of the important and vital ingredients in their products, if they were to start selling their own patented sensor technology that could take significantly better pictures with a phone-sized camera, which no company in the world has more incentive to do something like that, because they've found it so difficult to make any sort of moat around the iPhone, because software features ain't it, and trade dress and design like the iPhone 10 ain't it. So where's the one place that they could really innovate? It's the camera. And so if that camera just suddenly is unbelievably better than every other thing on the market, and they've got patent protection, that means something outside of China. So I hope we hear more about this. I hope this does go somewhere, because I think that phone cameras are nowhere near good enough, and cameras that are good enough are nowhere near portable enough. So I would love for life generally to be documented at like a higher level of image fidelity. So there's that. This article I think just came and went. This next one. And it made me excited. According to 9 to 5 Mac, people are noticing in the iOS 26 betas. I would love to know who was the first person to discover this. FaceTime in the 26 series of operating systems currently in beta will freeze your call if somebody starts undressing themselves. The power of AI, one assumes this is on device, right? And it's looking for nudies. It's like looking for stuff that looks like, I don't know if that means if you like, unzip your fly and stick a finger out the zipper, if FaceTime will stop. I don't know if this is designed for, corporate calls where suddenly you got, was it Jeffrey Toobin who starts masturbating in a Washington Post? I think that was Washington Post, and I think it was Jeffrey Toobin. Sorry, Jeffrey, if it wasn't you. Starts masturbating on a Zoom during the COVID years. I don't know if he's still employed, by the way. Like, I don't know if everyone got one free pass when they had the work from home stuff. Maybe it's for that kind of use case. It's probably all going to be under the guise of like, CSAM and child protection and whatnot. I don't know, man. Like, this is fucked. Like, this is, if you want to get nudie on a FaceTime, the fact that they're generally not recorded, I guess you could screen. I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to be in the middle of this. I think it would be fascinating to be in the room of the team that is building shit like this and hear them explain internally how they think about features like this. Because obviously there's plenty of impetus that like potential avenues by which you wind up with a feature on the board, on the card wall that says, hey, if we detect any penises or labias, not just blur it out, but like pause the video and be like, hey, do you need an adult? Like I don't remember if the article stipulated whether or not there's like some sort of like, no, unlock, unblur. I want this, right? Like button. Yeah, so that's fun. That's a cool, fun thing that our computers can do now. I don't know how to feel about it. That's weird. I also don't have children or pets, as we've been discussing. Speaking of the betas, it is currently July 19th, and on July 23rd is the expected day, according to the soothsayer Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, for the public beta to come out. So the developer betas right now are, they're stable, but it's a whole, Apple support really isn't they're gonna chide you when they have to replace your bricked device. But once you're on the public beta, like things are more supported. Your iCloud data is less likely to get fucked, and I'm probably going to move all my devices to the 26 betas when that comes out. So get ready, back up your shit now. If you want to start fresh, that would be the day to plan around it. In AI news, only like 5 fucking AI stories this go around. A vibe coder who doesn't know how to code keeps winning hackathons in San Francisco. So this is from the San Francisco Standard. This dude who seems like a real fun guy, former professional Yu-Gi-Oh player, the wannabe Pokemon trading card game. He moved to San Francisco in 2019. After retiring from professional Yu-Gi-Oh games, and started like some business. It says he worked odd jobs and eventually started a metaverse infrastructure company just as ChatGPT was released to the public in 2022. Much to his disappointment, the engineers he worked with had no interest in experimenting with AI. My head engineer said, if you ask me to use AI one more time, I'm going to quit, Tercio said. So he promptly folded the company and began attending hackathons to figure out how to use AI himself. And so he's started going to hackathons, vibe coding his way to like building good enough software to win hackathon competitions. And because he doesn't really know how to code or how the code works, but like that's kind of perfect for a hackathon because like all you got to do is like demonstrate something and have a good click through. And if you got a good idea, a clever idea or clever way to tackle whatever the problem or the theme of the event is, I could totally see you vibe coding your way. Now, like, of course, taking it from wherever that was, whatever mess you have to make to get it, where you want it to be inside of 6 or 8 hours or whatever, or a weekend, like, yeah, that's probably not the code base that you're going to scale to a million. But it is kind of funny to have all of these growth hackers. Well, I guess growth hacker is the wrong word. Hackery hackers. I don't know. I have like a cartoony image of like what it's like to actually be in the Bay Area in the 2020s because my references are so dated. But if you're like my brain immediately goes to hoodies and Mountain Dew, and those are outdated. I don't know what they're drinking over there. Even Soylent is old, right? Yeah, I imagine if you're a purist about hackathoning ethics, like only the hand typed, like we do it the traditional way. I come from a long line of hackathon competitors, and in my family, we type our code. Like I can only imagine the outrage at the traditionalist hackathon people. When I heard hackathon for the first time, I spat out whatever drink I was drinking, and I got on the next plane back to fucking Ohio. Hackathons are a joke, and the people who give a shit about them are fucking idiots. So like, good for this guy. Like, the idea that like a hackathon matters, or it's like what a fucking cesspool. So good for him, exposing how stupid all this is. So he's vibe coding really good, and of course this is now turned into a consulting business. It says Tercios is now known for being able to build anything quickly. Businesses reach out to him to contract out projects that would take software engineering teams weeks, and he delivers in hours. He even started running workshops to teach non-technical groups and experienced software developers how to get the most out of AI for coding. All of this has a productive and sustainable and workable way of doing things. Like it rhymes with how I might approach it in another universe, right? But like I guarantee you, when a business approaches this guy and says, I'm sick of how this takes my team weeks, build this for me in a few hours, they're not thinking in the back of their head that this guy, like the guy that we're hiring, has no way to audit the intrinsic quality of like what's happening here and like whether this will keep working. Like unless what you're really wanting to do is pay for a click-through prototype that you plan to throw away, having the engineer or the person who's building you the MVP and then handing it off, at least with the current state of like the latest and greatest AI technology, is like seems dumb. It seems like you probably want a developer with the same skill set and the same mindset, but the engineering knowledge to be able to inspect and incrementally improve that code, so you don't just end up with a Jenga tower that's mostly already falling over by the end of your 2-day contract. But what do I know? I've never even won a hackathon. Meanwhile, coding is dead, FYI, according to the University of Washington Computer Science program, the Allen School of Computering. This is a GeekWire article, and the audacious quote near the top: "Coding, or the translation of a precise design into software instructions, is dead." Balazinska told GeekWire via email. AI can do that. And then it says, and this is a thing that like I've heard many times from various higher ed software majors and professors: we have never graduated coders. We have always graduated software engineers, or swap in computer scientists, depending on what the major program's emphasis is. We've never graduated coders. Like, this is, I think, the closest to an optimistic case for AI coding if you're a professor in the field, right? Because like, your lunch is getting eaten, bro, because like Claude for $20 a month could probably teach anyone anything about software faster, better, and in a more personalized way that actually helps people accomplish and build stuff for $20 instead of however much a UW computer science credit hour. How much could that possibly cost? Like $1,000, $700? I don't know. Like, I'm glad that this person has carved out an optimistic idea of like an aspirational view of like, we're gonna try. But you read the article and it's just the same shit as everything else. It's like, students remark that like they're impressed that the professor is being honest about how they have no fucking clue what's gonna happen or what things are gonna look like a few months from now. But let's just kind of do it with ChatGPT or whatever and make it up as we go. And the I mean, the bureaucracy and like the goes intos to design a higher ed curriculum are so slow by AI move fast and break things standards that like the big, you know, Carnegie Mellon, like they're convening a group this summer to like, you know, revisit the curriculum and all that. How could that sounds like a meeting where a bunch of very opinionated professors are going to stand on two sides and then they're all going to have their vision for like how they would do this and how you'd overhaul it. And then they're going to half-ass it because it takes years and years to develop into like a clear and teachable, you know, systematized and you know, look, when you go to a university, right? You're looking for something timeless. You're looking for like, this is the bedrock foundation. This is what you stand on as an individual to be successful in your career. And of course, it's not going to necessarily prepare you for every job, but hopefully it'll give you the tools you need so that at your first job, if you are driven, you will be able to reach into that toolbox and then do the things that you need to do in order to be successful in your career going forward. That foundation, right? And this is why I went to a liberal arts college, because I felt like I understood that in high school. That foundation is necessarily like the stuff that doesn't change. It's your values and ethics and philosophy. It's your grounding and communication skills and understanding other people, other cultures, and the history that got us to the point that we're at today. It's about understanding, you know, like the von Neumann architecture, right? If you're in the computer world, and understanding like, you know, like this is how computers are basically put together. And here's the history of like, you know, how, in rough broad strokes, like how we got to the point that we're at today. And here's the important kind of plot beats along the way. And then here are the kind of abstract ideas and the evolution of those things, so that when you get a job and you're doing the next thing, you can lean back on this wealth of knowledge of all these other ways that we've done things. That is still valuable. That doesn't stop being valuable because that gives me a lot of chum to type into ChatGPT, to kind of give it examples, to use the right language, to know how to communicate with it. That's all very valuable, just like if it was a person. But instead, what they're seemingly all doing is just like realizing that their own economic value to students, especially in a slow job market, is under threat. So they got to change something, or else enrollment will just keep dropping. And what do they change? It's like, well, now I'm just going to become like a, you know, shittier than a YouTuber, but better than a TikToker instructor of whatever the current crop. And by current crop, I mean today minus 9 months ago AI coding assistants are. And I'm going to have to caveat everything with, I'm just learning this too, guys, and this will all be different in a year. And like, that's got to be super motivating for the fucking students. So, yeah, good luck, colleges, fucking idiots. Meanwhile, my alma mater, Calvin College, which rebranded itself to Calvin University, dumped almost all the liberal arts stuff, and like tons of professors let go, and, you know, all of the language programs are gone basically, because they're going to be a STEM school now. Like, good luck. There's a, look, it's not Schadenfreude. It's just like the writing's been on the wall for so fucking long that higher ed is super fucked. And that secondary and even primary school is kind of just kid jail, like not actually working towards real outcomes, especially since COVID, when nothing's really mattered. The fact that no one's really talking about it or looking at it that way or thinking more creatively about like, it's like, I wish our only options weren't stick with exactly everything we've been doing with the exact same structure, but that kind of actually only came around after the GI Bill in the 1950s, so isn't that old, but we're going to treat it like it's fucking sacrosanct over here. And then over here, we're just going to be like, what if we just gave all of our children to Peter Thiel and let him raise them? Like, those are not the only two options, and yet we live in a media ecosystem and a policy ecosystem in terms of the regulatory environment, like where those are kind of our only two options. So, yay. OpenAI was going to buy this thing called Windsurf. You might have heard of Cursor. It's an IDE that basically, like, they did a GitHub fork of VS Code, and they tacked on their own IDE their own AI assistant. Windsurf did that even before Cursor was cool. You know, like, I've complained about this before. I said Windsurf good for you. Like, take your money and fucking run because you're an unsustainable business. You are a feature, not a product. And like the longer time goes on, your VS Code fork gets crustier and crustier, and your AI feature differentiation, because it's going to be so easy to commoditize, that's going to dry up. Like, get your bag. It's a multi-billion-dollar deal. Whatever they ask for, you sign it. You sign it right the fuck now. Just sign it. Is, I think, what I said on this podcast, or at least I want to give myself the credit of having said that. So that's what I'm going to stand by. Well, the deal is off because OpenAI probably realized that Windsurf is stupid. And the whole thing could just be a VS Code extension if you really needed it. But also, like, now that you're looking at Claude Code, you're realizing actually living outside the IDE and letting the agent run a little bit more unfettered is a much, much more sensible solution. Having the agent sort of like take up half of the editor window, and you're kind of in this back and forth. Like, I wrote a blog post saying, AI agents make bad pair programmers, like bad pairs. And they are bad for pair programming for a lot of reasons that I talked about in there. I think people are realizing that, and like just having a terminal or having a something you could do like an at mention in a GitHub issue, and then like let the agent just asynchronously create a pull request for you. That makes way more fucking sense. Well, somebody at OpenAI probably realized that. They called the deal off. So all those people at Windsurf who thought that they were going to get millions and millions of dollars, they're not. So sorry for them, but you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Like that business, and now we're seeing Cursor going through a similar tumult. It had a timer on it, and it wasn't the typical VC startup timer of like you gotta exit, but in a certain way in a certain time, and get your early investors fed before it pops. It was a like this product only is going to make sense for maybe 20 months. So figure it out. And they failed. And Cursor's on the track to failing. So instead what's happening is Windsurf's leadership, some of them are going to Google, which is, Google's a famous retirement plan for incompetent fucking technical morons who don't know anything about product. Anyone who designs Windsurf as a product and then thinks that like we're going to turn our nose up at multiple multi-billion-dollar valuations because they really believe that the product is a fundamentally sustainable and smart thing. Of course they're going to end up at Google because like they're just going to make a shitty product and release it, and then everyone's going to forget about it, and then they're going to cancel it. I'm coming in with a lot of negativity today, but it's not my fault the world is so fucked. So maybe if you can go and unfuck the world, I'll have more positive shit to talk about. Think about it that way. So TechCrunch wrote an article that, thanks to confirmation bias, I fully agree with because I was already mad by the time this article came out. And yes, it cites Reddit, I think, in there, but it says the headline, Anthropic tightens usage limits for Claude Code without telling users. As one of those users who literally paid $200 for Claude Code's 20x max plan, the terminology. The day after I did that, it started like 2 days after, 3 days after is when it started really sucking. And I felt kind of baited and switched. Not hitting rate limits, just being like, this isn't as smart as it was 3 days ago. And little did I know the reason was, it's only really good on Saturdays and Sundays and at off hours. So yeah, this is about the rate limits per se, because I don't think it's necessarily picked up on the weekday versus weekend crunch. But to have at least an outlet outside of Redditors complaining, a real publication that people in tech read, write any kind of article about Claude Code's fuckery, that's a good thing. And honestly, I'm frustrated enough about it that part of me thinks like, man, Anthropic's Claude stuff, like Claude Force, Sonnet, and Opus, I'd explained them earlier, and it was to make this point. Like, they are just better enough than OpenAI's best coding agent and Google Gemini's best coding agent in terms of model. And clearly they've done something with Claude 4 to train it on like the Claude Code way a little bit, whether that's inputs and outputs and reinforcement learning, or whether it's just them having internal knowledge of how the model works and thinks, and they've factored that into the design of Claude Code. whichever direction, like they're a better fit and they work better together than the other terminal editors like OpenAI's Codex product, or Gemini's CLI. I've played with both of them, and they're right now they're at the point where they're better than Claude on a real stupid day, but worse than Claude on a good day. And the fact that I've got to think like this is fucking maddening. If you listen to my interview with Dave Mosher, I asked him, give me a way where all of this stuff doesn't come true, where the AI doesn't actually take off and revolutionize everything. And in the episode, he said something like, well, if we end up hitting scaling limits really early, whether it's energy caps or whether these things get just like absolutely bogged down and they can't provide the service. And you think about it, and like Dave had a good point, because right now the only people using Claude Code in anger are like 1% of the most, productive and busy like early adopters of just this one kind of like small career. So you can kind of imagine how people like Sam Altman have like conjured up numbers like, well, I need $4 trillion to build, nuclear power and data centers to meet demand. And if you're just drawing a naive straight line, as if like you could snap your fingers and have that tomorrow, and that hardware would always be good enough when all this hardware is changing so quickly, you can kind of see how somebody would come to that linear extrapolation of like, that's how much hardware we need. But I don't know. Like I'm genuinely at a loss for what I should do right now. Like, should I just code the old fashioned way and stick my head in the sand a while longer? Because that's what I've been doing. I've been engaging with these AI tools, and then I go away for a few months and just get shit done my old trusted, reliable way. And then I re-engage, and it's like when you see your cousin's kids only like, every few years, like, whoa, you've gotten bigger, right? But you don't hear that every day because your parents see you every day. But like, I only see you every now and then. You're like this tall. Wow, look at you. Is how I feel with a lot of the AI tools. But just because it's, looks like a pubescent teenager now doesn't mean that it's necessarily ready to drive. And maybe that's just where I'm at with it. So I'm going to keep fucking around with it. Maybe I'll just work nights and weekends. I don't know. So fucked. On the front of scaling it, another interesting article that was linked by Sam Willison, who's quickly becoming, I think, like the most prolific and maybe the most widely read blogger on AI shit. Sam Willison, the creator of Django. A lot of people didn't realize. Django being the kind of the Ruby on Rails competitor, but for Python 20 years ago. Let's see this. He linked to this article by Paul Kudrowski, titled, Honey, AI CapEx, capital expenditure, is eating the economy. And if you look at it, in the 1880s when we were building railroads, I'm just reading the graph here, 6% of GDP was spent on railroad infrastructure, which is a lot. In 2020, during the 5G and fiber buildouts, 1% of GDP was being spent on that. Also a massive investment for an economy as big as the United States. And this year so far in 2025, AI data centers are currently 1.2% of GDP. And you look at it, and he explains, like, in a very true sense, like AI data center buildouts and all this infrastructure and all this spending is kind of propping up a lot of economic indicators that are currently helping to, prop up stock prices, because investors aren't that concerned. It's like, oh, these tariffs and everything else aren't so bad because, like, look, like, last quarter's GDP, we're not really in a recession. Maybe there's a little bit of a clawback, but he's like, we'd be down like, whatever it is, 1.5, 2%, 2.1% in Q1, and we'd be in full four alarm blaze, recession frenzy if it weren't for this spending. Now, like, the difference, though, he makes this point, and I think this is a really good point to think about. When you build the 5G and the fiber infrastructure, especially like the rural broadband, like those are useful pipes for a long time. Those are connecting people, enabling communication, higher fidelity forms of communication and bandwidth. And we've seen over and over again that the more connected the more connections you put in place, the faster that you make them, economic activity tends to follow. And increasingly in a globalized service economy, it's just kind of cost of doing business. You've got to build that infrastructure for your overall country to stay competitive relative to other ones, is the theory. But in any case, like that fiber optic cable is going to still be useful in 10 years. There's no arguing that, or 20 years. Meanwhile, we're spending even more this year on AI data centers, and we're stuffing it to the gills with H100s and whatever G200s or the other NVIDIA cards. And these are rapidly depreciating. These are, going to be replaced every 18 months with new cards. And so and then those come with, different power requirements. You can't just swap in new ones for the old ones. And even if you could, 30% of the build out cost is like the fucking cards themselves, at least. Right? To say nothing of the power requirements, which only go up each time, because that's typically how NVIDIA's been able to scale stuff, is they when they even do manage to die shrink, they just get you bigger dies or cram more chips on the cards, and so the power consumption goes up. So to have, it's like if you were building a self-disappearing railroad, right? Like if you were building railroads, but like, oh yeah, the tracks dissolve every 6 years and you got to keep replacing them. Like this is a very, very high amount of spending, and it's being like, preemptively met with a lot of layoffs that are partly anticipatory, but like to his point, and it's a very good article. Like if you click through any of the links in this one, just to get your head around, like, where's all the spending going, right? Not just at the macroeconomic level, but also like a lot of firms are redirecting their spend towards AI build-outs and tooling and hyperscalers. And that's money that's not going towards paying staff. And that's money at the investor class level that's not going towards any other base sciences that don't have AI in the name, right? It's not going towards, a whole another class of businesses, and especially in a very, physical way, not going towards the construction of other kinds of infrastructure that we supposedly desperately need, right, for the aging infrastructure, at least throughout North America. So all that's great news. Yeah. Last one. We'll end on a happy note. People. You're a people. I'm a people. According to scipost.org, people with higher cognitive ability have weaker moral foundations. I'll read that again. People with higher cognitive ability have weaker moral foundations. Turn it on its head, and it's like, hey, if somebody's trying to take the moral high ground on you, if they're really religious, if they believe in a just and pure God and black and white, justice-oriented, righteous, indignation type, that like this is the right way to do things and this is the moral way, and like I'm a red-blooded Jesus-loving American, Santa was white kind of guy. Like, science says those people are stupider than me. So that's cool. Flip side is, I know that I've got a weak moral foundation and I kind of don't believe anything matters and that we're all just here for a while. And if humanity were to go away, like, yeah, we had a good run, like I don't feel like a need to perpetuate anything. I would say, if you were to give me a quiz of my moral foundation, I would be found to be lacking in moral fiber. Well, I think. That's not to say I'm a bad person. I'm just sort of like, chaotic neutral at best. I'm just a guy commentating on the world ending, for the most part, So because I've got the weak moral foundation, apparently I've got higher cognitive ability. And so you know what? That one just has me at the headline. I'm just going to choose to feel good about that. And if you're like me, and you are, because you're a sicko, because you just listened to almost 2 hours of my nonsense, and you were nodding your head, and you were feeling really good until I said that you lack moral fiber too. If you think that you're a highly moral person, with a real strong sense of ethics, and you really do believe in the black, white, right, wrong, shoot in an email, podcast@surreals.co, if you think you also have a high cognitive ability. If you think that you, because then on top of being, kind of a know-it-all, you're also arrogant. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I want to hear from you. I'll share the link so that you can read the summary, which is probably inaccurate. It was probably done by an AI note taker of a paper. So that's. See, now you know everything that's happening in the world, and I didn't mention Jeffrey Epstein once. So let's talk about some recommendations. I've actually got some interesting recommendations for y'all this time around. Sampling a bunch of different shows, watching a few movies. One, if you've ever played World of Warcraft or had feelings, you might like The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, Ibelin. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's a Netflix exclusive documentary. It's not a spoiler to say it's about a kid with a form of a muscular dystrophy who, as he, lost bodily function, found solace in World of Warcraft, the massively multiplayer online game. And then as he continued to lose function, it kind of increasingly became his whole life. And he didn't tell anyone in the game about it. He didn't tell his family really about the degree to which he'd found meaning and connection in the game until I'm not going to say it, until after. And the documentary is wonderful because it comes in two parts. It kind of plays out the life that the parents thought that their child had and the story in their heads about what it was like to be the parent of a child who you have to watch get weaker and weaker and weaker. And then they rewind and reset and say, here's the same story, but with the context of his whole other life, that even with a sip and puff, input system and very limited hand movement, is able to type and is able to, engage in relationships and be in a guild and go on adventures and talk to people and have this whole other kind of set of relationships that are just as valid as anyone else because of the equalizing aspect of just text chat, right? Another facet of it that's really interesting, and apart from me crying a lot, which I did, another part that I found fascinating was they extracted a lot of art assets out of World of Warcraft, and then they put them in some other animation studio. I don't know which one, and then they did their own lighting and rigging and used the models from World of Warcraft to do a lot of very detailed animation work so that they could illustrate what Ibelin's online life was in a way that was more engaging than the typical behind the camera, headshot of, with the heads up display and mashing on buttons and stuff. So instead they were able to kind of give more of a The Sims level of if you think of those animatics, that kind of expressiveness. And so it's actually really effective storytelling. And the dialogue was all just read from tens of thousands of guild chat, transcripts by either actors or the people involved. So those are really good. I went in with relatively low expectations, both because Netflix and also because I don't know, seems like a quick, easy algorithmic cash in to have a documentary about a World of Warcraft game. Yeah, I thought it was really moving, and something about the humanity of it, and a good reflection on sort of how communication technology, both accessibility technologies in terms of having different hardware that can enable people to do things like interact in virtual worlds, even if they've got disabilities, but also how communication technologies, the breadth of what's available, right? Where you have a game like this where voice chat was never really that typical, at least in the early days of World of Warcraft, and you could just chat with text, right? And I found that to be hugely liberating when I was in high school. I think the earliest interactive game that I would have played online was probably like a MUD, a multiplayer user dungeon or multi-user dungeon, I think is probably what MUD stands for, where it's like a text adventure, but there's other people there. Uh, yeah, chatting with people in those, right? Even when I was a kid, I'm sure that there's plenty of, you know, adults and stuff. It's sort of like it flattens this experience, but you could only imagine that if you had a condition where everyone that saw you in real life was judging you immediately or taking pity on you or treating you as different, having a place where like, you're fully masked from having to, you know, leak that out is really cool. And in the most recent handful of years, like with the way the gaming's gone and how many racists are just happy to be racist on the internet, uh, voice chat Vox has become significantly less popular in match made online games, and so we're going back to more text based chats and more kind of like gesture based, kind of objective based tracking chats, or communication styles. So anyway, I always find that stuff really interesting anyway. But this is like a pretty extreme point of it. So if you've got any familiarity with the game, or if you got a loved one who maybe like isn't really into gaming, but could see sort of like a lens into it through this, I think is really cool. Speaking of MUDs, there's actually a TV show that has multiplayer text adventures in it, or at least networked text adventures, and it's called Halt and Catch Fire, and it's already canceled. It ran for 4 seasons from like 2014 to 2017, so it's already like 10 years old. And I don't know where I heard about it. I think I probably heard about it from the Accidental Tech podcast. I think John Syracuse mentioned it as being good. And if you check the Wikipedia page, it's an AMC Plus thing. So you can, if you subscribe to AMC Plus, which you can do via Apple TV as a channel, for $8 a month or something. It's now regarded as one of the best series of the 2010s. Apparently at the time, like, so it's a period piece, right? Like it's about season one. I suspect each season is about different aspects of the burgeoning home personal computer market, and then later the internet. First season is about making your own IBM compatible PC. It's Cardiff Electric, real company. Like I was always wondering, like, how fictionalized is all this stuff? Because it feels pretty real, but the characters are too sexified to possibly have been what actually happened. And I'm told that season one I found riveting as somebody who's just I've always really liked shows and movies about like the early computing industry. Even shitty ones like Pirates of Silicon Valley and stuff with like Noah Wyle as Steve Jobs. Like I thought I find that stuff really, really compelling for some reason. Yeah, Halt and Catch. Apparently, season one like is the worst one, and I just finished that and I started season two, and it's really good. Yeah, the knock on it at the time, it never got really like a lot of viewership because it's a niche thing, and I could see how it would be hard to market. Was that it was too much like Mad Men, or it was derivative of the Mad Men formula, and I just. Unless your definition of Mad Men is a period piece that tries to actually be relatively accurate and is otherwise a workplace drama set in that, I don't see it. It never would have occurred to me to compare to Mad Men, and we're literally actively rewatching Mad Men right now too. So maybe I just like period piece workplace dramas is what I'm finding out. Anyway, let's Halt and Catch Fire. Link in the show notes. Video game wise, I'd finished Avowed after the previous breaking change in version 39. Great game, almost 100%ed it. Didn't have to drop down to a lower like difficulty level. I played on the normal ass difficulty level, which was cool for once because I normally don't take the time to get good at things. Another one that I'm playing on the normal difficulty level that's going well so far is Doom: The Dark Ages. Doom was rebooted in 2016. That was a great game, but it was kind of like an arena shooter, and like you had like a lot of puzzles shit to get from this door to that door, and there's a decent amount of backtracking, and it wasn't really my cup of tea. And then there was Doom Eternal, which was like all the things I didn't really love about Doom 2016, but just jacked up even further with even more backtracking and then sort of location-based puzzle solving. And that's just not what I'm looking for. I want it like a brain dead, like I want to lean back and shoot shit. And as somebody who's like, I don't like heavy metal I don't like, I don't like satanic and demony vibes. It's just not my jam. But there's something about this recent run at id of the now three most recent Doom games that there's a user empowerment angle, like the way they go about designing the worlds and the fast paced nature of the gameplay. The music is not like angry metal. It's like, yeah, you're a fucking badass metal. And as you play this newest game, which it comes with a shield, and it's more like, it's like the tagline is stand your ground. You can you just have a lot more tools in the toolbox to be successful as you're battling all these demons everywhere. And you can just kind of have a good, dumb, fun time with it in a way that I wasn't able to do with the most recent two Doom games. So that's great. The graphics are incredible. I'm rocking a 3090 GPU, and it's good enough to run the game at 60 frames a second locked and looking brilliant if you have ray tracing disabled. And this is the first game that has me thinking like this card is showing its age, because it's very clear that the lighting in this game sucks if you don't have ray tracing on your card. I would expect that a 5080 might actually perform better in most intents and purposes, just because, improvements to DLSS and better ray tracing lighting, where like, if you're not familiar with what ray tracing is, I'm not going to explain it now. Maybe I will someday. But like, basically just like, imagine like the light works like real light, where like light emanates from a source and then bounces off shit. Like, so it looks realistic. Everything else that you've ever seen in a video game up until the last few years, manually lit and kind of like using different tricks to light it from certain areas. That's why like a lot of games don't have changes in the time of day, so the sun can always be planted in the same fucking location so that they can bake the lighting and they don't have to pay the cost of calculating the lighting dynamically, which, can trick the brain to an extent. But then it's like, oh yeah, the puddles don't reflect the light from this and the cardboards don't reflect the light from that, and I don't have a reflection anywhere. So Doom the Dark Ages requires an RT capable card, but you can basically turn off all the RT path tracing and feature set, which just ends up with everything looking pretty dull and dim because they didn't take the effort to do a lot of manual lighting. So that's the only knock I have on it. Another one, Becky and I started this one. I hope we go back to it and keep playing it. We played the first chapter. It's called As Dusk Falls, and I think it captures a lot of what people liked about the Telltale games like Walking Dead. It's a story-based game where you choose outcomes, and those, your decisions have consequences. Like those outcomes really matter. And like, you choose the wrong thing, or you hit the button at the wrong time, and then like, oops, you got eaten by a dog, or oops, you got thrown in jail, whatever it is. Each chapter apparently takes over, like there's like very large gaps between each of the chapters. Like I'm told that the whole thing spans decades. And so you get to see your outcomes play out in like non-trivial ways, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, that now that kid's separated from a parent for a long period of time, like she's going to turn out different, the way that they pulled it off as a lower budget game is it's really it straddles the line between video game and a visual novel game, where a visual novel game is you just see like a picture and then you pick which dialogue option you want, and it'll branch. And then that way you can have lots of branching paths because the artwork isn't very expensive. In this game, it's sort of more like a comic, an in-motion comic book. And so this game kind of came and went, and I don't think it got a ton of attention in the press. But like go look up like a review, like the IGN review of it if you're interested, because the reviewer said something in there that like I totally agree with, which is while you're playing it, it does feel kind of weird that you're seeing like a lot of almost, here's a still and then here's something else that's moving in the background to kind of give a sense of moving, or like maybe there's flickering on the TV, and like there's little tiny bits of 3D motion that are here and there. Clearly it's like made on a budget. But when you remember having played the game, your memory kind of interpolates all those gaps. And so it feels like you actually were playing a game in a way that wouldn't be true if it was just a visual novel. So if that production style is the difference between games like this getting made and not getting made, then I'm a big fan. right? Like, of course, I'd rather everything be a super highly produced, slick AAA game that looks fucking awesome. But I suspect that a game like this has a limited market and wouldn't have been able to, see the light of day if that had been the expectation. So, As Dusk Falls is pretty cool. For some reason, playing it reminded me of one of my favorite pixel art emotional story games. It's called To the Moon. I cried a lot. It's a common theme in games I really like and media I really like. To the Moon is a really, really interesting independently created game. The maker has come out with a couple sequels and spin-offs and they're good, but this one and the soundtrack especially is just really gut-wrenching. So if you've never played To the Moon, do that. It is pixel art and it's attempts at comedy are a little irritating, not great, but the core story and the plot beats are very impressive. So it's a shortish thing to experience. And then last but certainly not least is the movie I was bitching about earlier with the other family being quite impolite. Was Superman 2025, James Gunn deciding he's going to just take over this superhero movie genre as Marvel continues to fumble the ball. They fired him because he got kind of canceled for a mean tweet in 2012 that was inappropriate, and then 8 years later or whatever, it gets dug up, and then Disney fires him because of online outrage or fear of online outrage. And then DC hires him to run the whole fucking show over there. And it turns out he's really good at comic book movies. So holy shit. Like Superman 2025. Like I'm not a Superman fan, right? I understand that if you're going to make a Superman thing interesting, it's got to be about the emotional context. It's got to be about how this invincible dude, is lonely as fuck. How is he going to relate to the world? And how is the world going to perceive him, right? Good guy or bad guy? And James Gunn clearly understands that's the way that you make Superman interesting, and that's exactly what this movie is. And so there's been, I'm sure it's doing great at the box office. The YouTube critics are going to go through and they're going to nitpick and say the dog was in it too much and shit. But fundamentally, I think like if you're just looking for like a straightforward chase the cat kind of, bada bing, bada boom comic book movie, it's wonderful. It's very well acted. It's funny. It's not like Guardians of the Galaxy funny, but like there's like, very signature James Gunn comic relief kind of planted throughout. Yeah, really, it's a solid A. It's a good ass comic book movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, I was able to sit through many minutes of a screaming child because I was so invested in watching this movie. So there you go. That's all I got right now. I'm playing another game that I didn't even mention here. Yeah, I forgot to mention it. I'm gonna write this in. It's a late breaking entrant. Claire Obscure Expedition 33. There we go. And now it's on the list. Also a Game Pass game, just like Doom of the Dark Ages. Look at me, and As Dusk Falls. I'm still not paying for games. All of them are available with your Game Pass subscription. Expedition 33 is a French JRPG. I'm not sure if I mentioned it last time. I think I mentioned I might play it. It is... So a JRPG is a Japanese RPG. Derisive... Not meant to be derisive, but like it was meant to, in the US gaming press in the 90s, they had to try to find a way to distinguish a computer role-playing game, which was its own thing, like an Ultima, right? Or early Elder Scrolls like Daggerfall or whatever, or Baldur's Gate. Like those kinds of RPGs, role-playing games, where they came to be known as CRPGs for like computer RPG. And the sort of role-playing games that were popular in Japan on the Famicom, like Dragon Quest, those or Final Fantasy, those came to be known in the Western media as JRPGs or Japanese RPGs. And I understand like there is a set problem there in terms of classification error, right? Where it's like the antonym of Japanese is not computer and vice versa. However, those are the titles. And if you are a fan of both, if you're a fan of JRPGs, like I am, like some of my favorite games in the 90s were like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI in the year 2000 or 2001 or whatever. Final Fantasy X is one of my favorites. If you're a fan of classical JRPGs, a lot of those companies are still making them. More so, they're remaking them, but like the magic has been lost to a certain extent. Like I feel like you look at a game like Final Fantasy 16, it feels more like a warmed over Game of Thrones impersonator, trying to be weirdly European, and kind of missing the mark. Uh, so a lot of the JRPG publishers and studios have sort of lost their way and haven't been, because they've always been best when the story is really strong, and I haven't. They tend to get so lost in the fan service and in the lore building, uh, and the collectathons, right? Like it's just not hitting the mark anymore. So what's interesting about Expedition 33 is like, what if you had some people in France, like a relatively small group, who start off with the crowdfunding route? They eventually staff up to like, a full-size studio and augment with a lot of contractors. But like they start small and with a vision of like, we want to make a good JRPG. Like we love JRPGs. We want to make this kind of game. We just so happen to be French. And because I play JRPGs for the Japanese language practice, I kind of poo-pooed this at first. I was like, no, I don't, I like to play them in Japanese mode, so I learn something. I'm not here to learn French, so this doesn't do anything for me. I overcame that because the music is fucking great. The artwork is fucking great. The story, I'm not even going to tell you what the story is. The story hooks you pretty much immediately because it's a fascinating world that they've built that you can communicate in a 5-minute, 10-minute prologue. The combat is engaging, but still turn-based without being like semi-action, like feel like you're in some sort of action RPG. There's not a lot to complain about. Like this is a really good fucking game. It's got the Dead Souls-y element of like you have a rest mechanic. So like if you kill a bunch of enemies and then but they took out all your health and you need to recharge, you can rest at a camp, but then it'll respawn all the enemies, forcing you to actually get better at killing them all without losing all your health again, or carving out a path where you can avoid them. Like it's yeah, I like it a lot. I think I might stick with it, which is a problem because it's supposedly a 60-hour game, which means it's going to take me 300, 400 hours. Because I'm really fucking slow somehow. So yeah, a lot of good recommendations. I think they're good. That's why I'm recommending them. All right, on to the mailbag.
You've got mail.
All right, looking at the mail. Before I get into it, remember, I've mentioned it a couple times before, podcast@searls.co. However many people you think write in, fewer people usually do, and I think you're smarter and more attractive than most of them, but not this first one, because she's the most smartest and attractive. Because Becky wrote in, my wife. Hi, Becky. Subject: no fair. She says, hey now, I think it's unfair of you to say on the podcast that I didn't notice the doorbell was not working. You got home 24 hours after me, and I don't believe anybody came to the door during that time. LOL. All right. That's fair. The doorbell stopped working. I talked about this on the podcast last time, and I had to replace it. And yeah, maybe no one rang the doorbell, but how would we know? Because we got no footage and no doorbell dings. But, I get it. But, you know what? I'm not going to try to defend myself here because I don't even remember what I said. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to do the right husband thing and just say, I am terribly sorry, Becky. You're absolutely right. And however my words made you feel in that moment, listening to the podcast, I'm sorry. That's my bad. It's totally reasonable for you to expect your doorbell to work. And it shouldn't be something that you feel like you have to check every time you leave the house for more than a few days. So I think valid. Didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Richard writes in, All right. Will you read anything anyone sends you? I bet that would increase show comments. Sign up for Code Triage today. Richard, by the way, maintains a thing called Code Triage. But I'm not going to spell triage for you because he didn't ask me to. Listening to your coffee review and, quote, it tastes like a Delta Lounge is a surprisingly clear description. Good work there. However, I pegged you for a coffee snob, so I was a little surprised. I was expecting a little bit more James Hoffman of an option like a fellow Aiden or something. These are references I don't know, so apparently I am not a coffee snob. Or a pour over with a Kalito wave. Now you're just making fun. Is that kind of like an... Somebody says a Kalito wave, I assume it's some kind of like... I'm imagining like an olive martini with some fun twist. What's your over and under on high-end coffee snobbery? I don't even know how I would do an over-under because I don't know what I'm betting on. I'm acidic as a person. Look, man, the goal of coffee is to put caffeine in me. And if I can do that with like Nestle instant coffee and just like grin and bear it, if that's what I got to do, it's what I got to do, you know? My goal with coffee is to have a relatively neutral experience. Like I want to make a strong pot of it. I'll mix it with hot water because I like to have a hot thing in my hands to hold. I'm always ingesting fluids. The only time I get dehydrated is when I record these fucking podcasts because I'm standing up and talking to the camera. Yeah, we returned the fancy coffee maker with all the buttons. It was too much work. It like if every morning it's like at random while it's making a thing and just decides, hey, you got to go refill the water reservoir. Like you're in the middle of pouring a fucking drink. You don't have a way to measure that you're out of water. Then you fill it up, and then it gets like halfway further through the drink, and it's like, whoa, you got to empty the coffee grounds. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? You got to pull that out. And empty out. I was like, you know what? Like the nice thing about my normal fucking coffee pot is I fill up the water reservoir. I grind some beans in a burr grinder. Does a pretty good job of grinding beans. Put them in the fucking filter. Hit go. Boom. You got a whole fucking pot of coffee that you're not going to finish. I don't know, man. Like, I think I would lose respect for anyone who spent too much time thinking about coffee every day or like working to make their coffee, right? Like there's a device out there, like a coffee pot that does like a pour over style with like a sprinkler head, and it's automated so that you're not wasting your time very carefully tending a very temporary garden with a little sprinkler hose over a hand drip arrangement because you think that's somehow going to get, unlock the flavor crystals. I don't fucking know, man. Coffee's good. I like to drink it. I'm addicted to it. So I do it because I'm addicted to it. It's not because I'm classy. Ronan says, this is not feedback. We'll see about that, Ronan. For once, I've managed to finish your latest episode before the release of the next one. So if you unlock achievements, I would like one, please. I should start handing out achievements. That's a good point. You get 10 points for that. 10. Your breaking score is now 10, Ronan. Anyway, with so many hours of broadcast, there are way too many things you said that I would like to give you feedback about, so I won't give any. Except that I'd like to thank you for being a voice of reason and balance in today's cacophony of polarized bullshit. It is a breath of sane air. It could almost give me faith in humanity. Almost. Well, I'd hate to do that. Don't. If you take that away from this, then maybe you're not listening closely enough. The fact that your opinions happen to more often than not coincide with mine does not affect my assessment at all, I promise. I wouldn't think so. You seem like a straight shooter. Based on your complimenting me, I'm inclined to trust you. And that's it. Your show is great. Thank you for keeping me company as I do house chores, and please don't change your tone, as I really appreciate knowing that some people are smart enough to enjoy the orchestra, while idiots like me cannot help worrying about lifeboats. Now, look, I'm all about self-deprecation, but if you like this show, you're not an idiot. We talked about it earlier. The lack of moral fiber means you have high cognition, Ronan. You gotta be kind to yourself. I think I think anyone listening to this show is fucking fascinating, and that they should be doing scientific studies on you. But frankly, I really I don't know. I have fun. Like I don't view myself as being politically at some center point, or I'm really just like but at the same time, like when you're speaking in public and you like, like if I had a business, right, I was like, I think both parties suck. You need to make a big stink about like I'm a independent thinker. I'm a fierce independent, right? And like you say that, and it's like, but then you look at like 20 years of polling data, and pretty much anyone who calls themselves an independent just votes for Republicans, and they're just embarrassed by what the Republican Party has become, right? But then, fortunately, the Democrats have been catching up, and like in 2020 and stuff, like the far left overreach of sort of the 2020 internet pre Twitter acquisition internet, like, and that was just strong enough to create kind of like an insulated backlash on the other side, so that like the horseshoe theory of like both those extremes are so unpalatable culturally that you can kind of just exist in the middle as a guy and be like, well, that sounds stupid and that sounds stupid, and I guess I'm just here now, which is a increasingly popular position. So, vote your interests, and for most people, that's probably going to be, relatively progressive policies, or just do whatever Joe Rogan says, which is one way to live a life. I hear he's got a podcast. I wouldn't listen to it though because it's too long. Andrew writes in. Punch up is the subject. For context, he's going to be talking about a pun, so I copied it here. Version 39's pun, we read it earlier, was, I bought a new camera and I'm having a hard time learning how to use it. No matter what I do, it just doesn't click. Andrew writes, it's expressly not the point of the segment, but I wanted to offer an alternative to today's pun. Here's his alternative take on what could have been Aaron's pun. I bought a new camera and I'm having a hard time learning how to use it. It would be easy if I could just focus. See, the verb click and the verb focus, I think we'd all agree, especially on a fancy camera, focus is a more natural verb to try to think of a pun. And yeah, I think he's right. I think Andrew has improved the pun just flat out. It would be easier if I could focus would be the only, tweak that I'd make, but I think it's good. He closes. I don't think I have anything else to add. I do feel bad that you're starved for email. Shame on all those other listeners for not writing in. It's very easy to do. Yeah, I think unless you're under 25, you probably know how to write an email, and you can literally send me one line and I will probably read it. I had one person write in, John wrote in, and this is the end of a story, or the start of a story. He wrote in, said, I took your advice and got some baseball tickets in Japan. We're going to the July 20th Giants game at the Tokyo Dome. Quick question on that. I bought the tickets on StubHub, and there's apparently no option to have them digitally delivered. After a bit of research, I ended up putting the hotel as the delivery address. Do you have any advice on this? It seems like they're going to be delivered the day of the game, so I'm hoping I can talk to somebody once we check in and sort through any mistakes I made and update the delivery address if needed. So this piqued my interest because this immediately sounded like either a scam or a situation where, he's not going to get those tickets in time, if at all. And I warned him. I was like, if this was me, like, how much did you pay for these tickets? And I look at the ticket, like, pricing and like where those tickets are probably located in the stadium, and knowing that like the resale tickets game doesn't really tend to go through StubHub. So now I'm thinking like it's probably even extra overpriced on top of that. And potentially like, and this happens sometimes, scalpers, like foreign scalpers from other parts of Asia come to Japan, and then they sell to tourists from wealthier countries. Not just in event sales, but in all sorts of like other products and stuff. Tenbai, that's the verb. Yeah. Like scalpers basically. So I warned him off. I was like, John, we got into a back and forth of emails. Spoiler alert, this is not the end. This is not the first time I read this email. I replied, I was like, here, there's another game the same fucking day at the other Tokyo team, the Yakult Swallows, at the Jingu Stadium near Harajuku. And I actually like that stadium more. I think it's more fun. It's like a less popular team, and so it's like a little bit more of a cozier attitude, and the fans are they got a good vibe. The Swallows is like not a sex thing. It's like the bird swallows. Although the mascot who played the swallow, like they have the same person in the mascot costume. Like that comes part and parcel. Like that individual human being inside the costume is the character. He died. And so now they've just got the lady swallow out there, and she's doing her best to pull the team. Yeah, I've been to probably half a dozen Swallows games over the years. Great stadium, and I was like, they got a game the same day. They do direct ticket sales, so I actually bought the tickets and transferred on his behalf for him because it's a Japanese language only site if you want like the full ticket inventory. So that's the kind of I didn't get a commission on that. That's the kind of customer service that I provide if you just write into this podcast. Because as I mentioned earlier, I apparently also translate lyrics for bartenders. And part of having really that's not valuing my time at all, you can take advantage of that by just inflating my ego by writing into my silly podcast. That's. I hope you have a great time, John. Your game is, wow. I guess it's July 20th. As I'm recording this, like 1 p.m. there. So you're probably thinking about going to the game right now. Have fun. I hope it goes great. I hope I didn't fuck up. Hope your tickets work. Spencer writes in. Got a lot of mail. Look at that. Now don't think this means you don't have to send email now, because you do. Because I always get a whole bunch and then I get none. In fact, we got like a handful more, but I don't think I can get to them. I think I'll make this the last one. Spencer writes in, your podcast is the one I most look forward to listening to when it comes out. Thank you for sharing yourself with us. How do you think companies should change their hiring practices with the rise of AI-assisted coding tools for work, as opposed to tools for helping cheat the hiring process? Okay, so specifically right. So like certain number of people are like trying to game take-home exercises and stuff by violating the rules and using AI to build them. He's saying like, how should we probably be changing job descriptions is my guess, right? My company, for example, encouraged use of these tools in our day-to-day, but we struggled to incorporate that into our interview process. Oh, okay. So I had it wrong again. So basically job descriptions are relevant, right? Like how do we hire for AI first coders, right? That's probably the marketing lingo that you want, even though it's disgusting and stupid and wrong. That's probably a tag that your recruiter should be using on LinkedIn recruiting to try to solicit people to look at your job posting. That starts with that. The job posting should be clear about your, expectations. And if one of those expectations is we want people who use all of the tools will avail themselves of all the tools available to provide the most value in the least amount of time and effort over, whether that's short-term value, like get it done like that vibe coder or prototyper, if that's the kind of business you're in. I doubt it. Make that clear. If it's, hey, this is a long running app and we've got this tight knit team and we're all in it to win it. And we've been here for a long time and we're, carefully, curating and improving and incrementally making this thing better. But, there's always, we still want to take advantage of the best tools to enable us to do even more things better, more ambitiously, better, yada, yada, high quality, whatever you value, right? Just encode that. Encode the value. And this is like, if you go back and read the full breadth developers post that I wrote, the goal there was really to say sort of the aristocrats ending to that post is everything I'm saying here was great advice 10 years ago. Focus on your ability to communicate. Map from somebody having a need or a problem, and you be the creative individual who translates that into a concrete, actionable solution, right? Think in terms of the return on investment. imagine how much you cost. Imagine how much any of this costs. Like whoever's paying your paycheck and everyone else's paycheck, imagine the fully loaded costs over the period of time, as well as the opportunity cost of anything else they could have been doing with that time, right? And that, so the investment of time and money. You multiply that together and then you think, okay, so is what I'm being tasked with feasibly going to provide a return on investment? And if so, over what time horizon? You should have a really sharp understanding of that, because if it's like, whoa, they're paying for 2,000 developers and we're mostly just keeping the lights on, like, you're probably not going to be able to, organization wide, like, demonstrate any kind of ROI, which means when there's lean times or that executive realizes they can fire 80% of you, like, you're going to get bopped on the head. So think about your ROI and make it your objective to increase it and then to demonstrate it and to advertise it, right? These are all like good advice for people who are in companies trying to succeed in the era of AI. Now, in terms of what are you recruiting for, I think the job descriptions should reflect whatever values you have. What's your particular spin on each of those attributes? How do they manifest in the actual work, so somebody who's just reading some bullet points can get some kind of idea of what kind of company are you? Are you in person or are you remote? To what extent are you more order takers from some business function, or are you more bought in and having collaborative discussions? And be honest about what the role is, right? And when you say AI assisted coding tools, like that can mean anything, right? Like that's a wide, there's an AI button on every single fucking app at this point. So if that means image generation of flowchart diagrams, if that means like, using code review tools, right? Or using it to like learn new technologies, or if your team is using specific tools, I'd probably, because everything's so fast moving, I'd probably include some kind of blurb or a blog post that you could reference of like, here's how we've been using it, and here's the mindset with which we've adopted, and here's what we've learned so far, and here's what we're doing now or doing next. Like a little like telegraph for them, like that in terms of AI adoption. Here's our mindset, here's where we're at, and here's what, here's basically you're painting a picture of the bus for them and giving them the opportunity to opt in or opt out. I think that's frankly more important than assessment, because assessment is really hard anytime. But if you're really clear with somebody that this is the job, and you do a really good job of saying, like, if you're not going to fit on this bus, it's not going to work out, explicitly or implicitly communicate that. Like, most people in a market like this will opt out ultimately if it's not going to be a good fit. If they're a stick in the mud, or if they're just not, if they're super intimidated by this stuff and they just aren't engaging with it, they'll probably know that they're not going to be successful in your interview process. Most people, some people are just convinced that they're God's gift to humanity. But I suspect that like you getting really crisp about articulating what you want, like, what does the ideal developer look like? And it might not just be what you're already doing. You might be solving for, we want to bring in some fresh blood, some new talent who's got the skill set that we don't necessarily have. So we're looking for experience that we lack, right? And sometimes that's the case. And when that's the case, I try to be honest about like, we don't know how to fucking evaluate this. So you creative individual at the other side of the table, how would you, if we asked you to, demonstrate for us that you know what you're talking about and you're not just like blowing smoke up our ass? Can you please think of a way to do that? And if they can't, do they really know it that well, right? How would you demonstrate it? And for engineering roles, that's usually pretty possible. It's a lot harder for roles like sales, like where you can't talk to the people that they were selling to for obvious confidentiality reasons, and they can just blow up smoke up your ass the whole time. Hiring for sales roles is really, really hard as a result. But the interview process, what you're probably thinking of when you ask this is like, what do we ask and what kind of exercises work? I would lean really hard into pair programming. I would say like, fuck take home exercises. They're not going to tell you shit anymore, because half the people will try to do it by hand and half the people are just going to have tools generate it for them. And if it comes out and it's super high quality, it doesn't really tell you how long it took. And increasingly like time to productivity is becoming more important as a metric for the first time, really, because the expectations are going up, that developer productivity be going up. And we really haven't seen that in a concrete employment affecting way for the last 20 years. As a result, I would lean into pair programming. I would say we're going to do this together. You're going to drive. You're going to show me the tools you use on your machine. You can use whatever tools you want to get the job done at what you consider to be a high level of quality. You know, what amount of testing do you think is appropriate? Pretend this is a production system. Pretend that we're, and so one of the things that we did at Test Double is we created a couple of repositories that were like half baked but feasible. And then the pair programming exercises was like adding a fourth feature to the thing. How would you do that? And what's that look like? And how's that shaped? In today's era, if somebody shows up to that interview and they're like, all right, well, I got Claude Code over here. I got my editor over here. I'm allowed to use Claude Code, right? And then you say yes. Like inside of an hour, you might actually be able to see some interesting shit. Now, given the fact that Claude Code doesn't seem to want to work during business hours on weekdays, the other thing that immediately comes to mind when I think about how would you actually evaluate people is like, you got to consider like the stochastic parrot stuff, like, and the degree to which these systems are under stress. The time of day that you interview somebody might materially impact the performance of not them, but the tools that they're using, right? So all of a sudden, if I'm the one interviewing, I'm like, hey, look, can we schedule this for 7 p.m. and like make up a story about how I've got a day job and I need to do this at night because I would have a higher degree of likelihood that Claude Code would behave well for me in my interview. That's mildly fucked. But that's so it really is incumbent upon the interviewer and the process to accommodate that kind of variability. Like the interviewer should be able to assess the tools and understand, like, you know, if they're just using Vim and Terminal and now this non-AI stuff, it's like a deterministic system at that point. Like if they can't make the editor go vroom, then that's a them problem. But now that we've got this other actor in there and we are using it too, and we're kind of in this amorphous goo, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and you kind of have to soothsay it and offer it peace offerings and ritualistic sacrifice, that does get hard. And so I think that like offering candidates a mulligan when that is detected, when they're saying, hey, this tool's not working well today, can we get a rain check? You know, I think you gotta accommodate that, frankly. Fortunately, it's a slow hiring market. Hire slow, fire fast. That's what they always say. So it's not like you're going to miss out on candidates typically. If you need to talk to them a second time, third time. Honestly, that's probably what I would do. You know, proof of the pudding is in the eating. We just say proof is in the pudding in America, and then we don't think about what that means. Yeah, so that's enough email for me. I got tired. I got a few good emails for next time, but I don't want to read them. I want to read your email. podcast@searles.co. I hope you've had a good time. I hope your life's going well. I hope it's not going not well. I think that we are, we're living through some really interesting shit right now, and it's scary and it's unsettling, and it's not clear what direction it's going in. It's just like these are choppy seas and choppy waters, and by golly, I'm glad to have you here with me. So let's all just do our best to, trying to think of a clever, like a pithy way to end this thing. I don't really know what I'm supposed to say, so I'm just gonna